I'll explain later, but I video record classes. In case you miss class, you can watch online. You can also watch yourself as you do presentations and give yourself feedback or critique as you watch your performance improve throughout the semester, or summer. Short and intense, 8 weeks here. Okay. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself, how I started teaching communications, how that will relate to the stuff we will do in class. I have a communications business. I coach people on business communications, salespeople, finance people, that kind of stuff, people who need to give better presentations. My background coming into that, way before that, years and years ago, I used to be an actor, and I learned what you might imagine an actor would learn about communications, how to use good body language, good eye contact, how to use content with the right amount of dramatic flair. Long story short, I went a different direction from acting. I went to business school, I worked in finance for a couple of years, and then I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do, it's always fun. Didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do what I do now, which is coach people on communications. So I started this business and started coaching people on communications. And this process of doing this has been me thinking about what I did business environment and how I was successful using various acting techniques that I had learned before that. So I thought about the things that I knew about storytelling, the things I knew about body language, the things I knew about good eye contact, and what I was using without even really thinking about it in a very traditional finance environment. And it's a process of thinking about how I can explain that, passionately show that to other people. So some of the things we will do in class, you'll see, Professor used to be an actor because he's doing this weird sort of acting type of thing. But I've always thought of how that is related to a business environment, and I always want to make it immediately useful and actionable to business people such as yourselves. That's a little introduction about myself. Let me at this point go through the syllabus, give you an idea of how we're going to structure the course, see if you have any questions about that. Alright, got some basic information at the top. My email, my phone number, if you need to contact me for any reason. Yeah, does anyone need the syllabus and the... Okay, I got you. Okay, if you need to contact me, let me know. Got the course description. No textbook required for the course. No materials at all required for this course. I'll give you the exercises, I'll explain what you need to do. There will be information in the syllabus about all the assignments, and anything that needs clarified will be clarified in class. Learning goals and objectives, just learn to communicate both orally and in writing. So we're going to do a lot of oral presentation work, and we're going to do some writing presentation. Let's come back to the academic integrity discussion. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's turn our attention now to page 4. On page 4, it's going to tell you everything you need to know about what we'll be doing in class each day and what assignments or what preparation is required for you to get ready for class. Tonight, we'll just overview the course. Then we'll talk a little bit about how we make technical presentations. You're presenting numbers, graphs, statistics, what sort of techniques you can use to make it clear to your audience and keep your audience engaged. Next week, we will take that information and you will do a technical presentation yourself. I'll explain how I want you to put together some PowerPoint slides, present some graphs, present some complicated data without using anything complicated that's going to confuse us, and see if you can use those techniques as you practice them yourself. Class 3, we'll think about body language, how we can build on what we've learned in the technical analysis of the technical presentation stuff, how we can use good eye contact, practice that, force ourselves to use good eye contact, good body language, good movement, that sort of thing. Class 4, we will move to the writing section of class, and I will show you a simple system for writing a business essay, a clear one-page essay that was developed by the former head of Rutgers Business School Communications Department, Carter Daniel. He was the head of the department years and years ago, and he wrote this book on how to write a concise business essay. I will teach you that format, and we'll do it in a number of different iterations. Class 5 and 6, we will move from making the larger, broader presentations to a bigger audience to thinking about how we communicate one-on-one with a person. We're going to have a difficult conversation about someone's not pulling their weight on the team, someone needs to adjust their business strategy, any sort of difficult conversation like that, what sort of techniques we can use to make that the most effective and most impactful. And we will do that all under the banner of emotional intelligence. Has anyone ever heard of emotional intelligence? Yeah. What have you heard about it, Evan?
It's the ability to read people and read situations.
Sure, sounds good to me. All right, so is someone in a bad mood? Is this a good time to approach them? Is this a bad time to approach them? And also, reading other people, it's about thinking about yourself. All right, I'm in a bad mood. All right, well, now this is probably not the best time to have this conversation because it's going to ruin a business relationship that is going to, and I'm going to feel the effects of that for years. So let me think about a different time, a different venue, a different place to address this conversation. We'll do that over 2 classes, Class 5 and Class 6. Class 7, we're going to think about on-camera stuff. Suppose you're giving a press conference. Suppose you're giving an interview for your company. Suppose you're doing a video conference with a group in another city, another state, another country. What sort of techniques can you use to present yourself as positively as possible? Class 8, we're going to do something which I find exciting. I think you will find exciting as well. We will do improvisation. We call it Improvisation for Business People Workshop. This is interesting stuff. Improvisation is in acting improvisation. Has anyone heard of that before? Anyone know what that is? Yeah, does anyone want to tell us what it is? Renu?
I've just seen like improv comedy
Okay.
on like YouTube. I mean, what's that show on ABC?
Whose line is it anyway?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's pretty much it. Right?
Okay. Yes. Yes. So we'll do comedy improv. All right. We'll come up here. We'll do improv type stuff. This has become popular in the business world for a couple of reasons. Improvisation teaches people, business people, to be spontaneous, to be flexible, think on your feet. Also encourages creativity, encourages listening skills, and encourages that collaboration that comes with all of that. So we'll think about why that's related to a business environment, why it might be useful for you, and then we'll have some fun doing it. Any questions on all that so far? All right. So this is going to be a short and intense class time period, as I mentioned. Usually I teach this over 8 weeks. It's 3-hour sections, usually I teach this over 9 weeks. 3-hour sections. It's condensed to 8 weeks, 3.5-hour sections. Hopefully I will not keep you 3.5 hours each and every time. However, I just want to prepare you. At least the first and the second class, so the first class being tonight and the second class being a week from tonight, we will probably go right up until 9:30. I've tried to cram a bunch of stuff in to get you started with the first bit of material. So tonight we're going to be doing the lecture on technical presentations. There's also a team exercise I will have you all do. Do we have some laptops in that room? Who has a laptop? Okay, right, so we have plenty of laptops. So I'll divide you probably in groups of 4 or 5 and have you work on this team exercise. And then we'll see if we can practice some of the stuff we learned in the first hour and a half of class in a quick little presentation. And it will keep us here probably till about 9:30, but I think that's a good thing for you because often I give this exercise as an outside assignment, and I ask people, I tell them not to spend too much time on it, but they do anyway. Spend hours preparing, whereas you folks tonight, you're going to have maybe 20, 30 minutes to prepare and see if you can throw together this presentation under pressure. Next week, when we give our technical presentations, I With a group this size, we are probably definitely going to be here right until 9:30, and we're not going to get all of them done. But we'll do our best to stay awake, stay engaged. Class 3 and Class 4, I can shave a little time off that and get you out a little bit sooner. Okay, so that's just a little heads up on the next 4 weeks of your Thursday nights. On the following pages are detailed assignment descriptions. Every assignment you have in this class is going to be detailed description. Of course, I'll explain it a little bit more in class, but you can pretty much look at it just based on what I have in the syllabus. You could look at the way I've decided to grade it based on the grading rubric, what's important in terms of getting a good grade, the due date, all that stuff. Pretty much everything, or some things you will, if you submit something to me, you will submit it via the Blackboard assignment link. Is everyone familiar with Blackboard? Use that. If you have any questions, let me know. I can solve it myself or direct you to the right resources. And then some of these assignments, it's just a presentation where you won't actually submit anything. So we've got the technical presentations we'll do in Class 2. We've got what I'm calling the technical summary presentation, which you'll do in Class 3, which is where you'll take your technical presentation, you'll sum it up, condense it down to about a 60-second summary, and you'll just present that without slides. We'll talk about how we can use that to improve body language. So then, then we're getting into our written conclusion. I believe Class 4, we'll talk about that business essay format, and I'll have you start with a written conclusion. I'll have you do some stuff associated with the emotional intelligence. We'll discuss the content here, and you'll go home and think about times you get upset and how that helps encourage your interpersonal conversations. Number 5, you'll do a memo. We'll talk about how you can explain to a fictitious bunch of company employees how their lives are going to be a little more difficult because of some changes in the organization, how you can use some writing skills to make that as smooth of a transition as possible. And then number 6, I mentioned we're going to do some on-camera work, thinking about how you would conduct yourself over a video conference so you don't look weird on camera. I've created some scenarios. You'll read through these scenarios, play a certain role, and we'll practice on Skype, or we'll practice on the interview, or we'll practice with the press conference. And I think we're doing that Class 7, so I think Class 4 or 5 we'll talk about and assign roles, but you could go ahead and read ahead and think about what role you might like to play between now and then. So those roles take up a bit of space. And then the last assignment, I think, is number 7, the Emotional Intelligence Summary Essay. This will be the same business essay format that I teach you in Class 4. And this is particularly interesting for me for a number of reasons. One, it gives you a chance to think about what you can take away from the emotional intelligence material we learn. It also gives you a chance to think about condensing that down to a clear, one-page, concise summary. And that's going to be helpful for us as we are practicing to write clearly, write succinctly, and give your reading audience something valuable based on a one-page summary. All right. On the following page, I've got everything summed up in terms of the assignments, point value. There's a point value for all the assignments I mentioned earlier. There's also a large class participation component in this class. So there's no test, there's no big exam, there's not necessarily material that you're going to remember precisely years from now, but your ability to get something out of the content in this class will be strongly related to your effort coming here, participating in the exercises, watching other people present, think about how they are or are not using the techniques that we learned in class, and your ability to vocalize that in front of your peers, or just practice vocalizing that in front of your peers, is is going to be important to your development in this class. So I make class participation a large component of your grade. I'll actually give everyone a grade every class between 0 and 5 points. I've got the grading scale, so we can turn back to page 2 or 3. I can show you the grading scale for class participation. 5 points. You want 5 points for each class. Come on time and make a significant contribution to class discussion. I say 2 or 3 good comments is a significant contribution. 4 points on time and some contribution. 3 points coming on time and just pretending to be engaged in class. And less than that if you're not engaged in class or not paying attention. 0 points if you don't make it to class. I will put a 0 in for your class participation. But you have the option of making that up. I mentioned I video record every class. So you can watch the video and you can email comments to your classmates that way. And the procedure with that is to just watch the video and think about 2 or 3 things you would have said if you were in class. Ideally, specific feedback for specific students. Say, hey, Renew, I think your technical presentation was fantastic, but I would have recommended you use the transition technique we learned in class. That would have made it a little bit more whatever. You can use the Blackboard function, and you can email everyone, including me, 2 to 3 insightful comments. And you can get full class participation comments or points that way. So that is attendance. That's everything we need on grading. Any questions on that? Yes, Renee?
So, my job is a little weird. There's no 9 to 5. I work with like medical devices, so it's mostly running back and forth.
Okay.
And sometimes I get stuck in cases. So the on-time attendance part.
Okay.
If I can't always guarantee that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Do your best, and I would say just try to make 2 or 3 good comments when you are here, and we'll negotiate that as class goes on. If it's like too much of a problem, we'll say watch the video for the first 30 minutes and send another comment to make up that time. It's we'll figure it out as we go. Any other questions? Right. One other thing I want to mention before I move away from the syllabus is this academic integrity discussion on page 2. I do want to spend a couple minutes discussing this. If you are familiar with standards of academic integrity and plagiarism, then please flatter me and let me go through this material a little bit. I know that we have a diverse range of students at Rutgers, and some people aren't as familiar with standards of plagiarism, standards of academic integrity, so I think it's really worthwhile that I spend a couple minutes discussing that. So the issue I found in this class, almost every class, are some issues of plagiarism. So I want to be clear about what that means and make sure everyone understands it and tell you how the process with that works. And I'm not trying to start on a negative note. And again, if you're familiar with all this, I'm not going to say anything that you haven't heard before, but I have had a number of just very difficult situations, people who just didn't really understand what plagiarism was and fell into certain traps. And I guess fortunately or unfortunately, there's a very strict process here at Rutgers. If I discover a plagiarism issue, I can't just say, hey, you made a plagiarism issue, I'm going to take a couple points off, and here's how to not do it again. If I discover it, I'm actually required to send an academic integrity report to the office that deals with that. Because you're grad students, I can't decide the punishment myself. It goes out of my hands and someone else goes through a process of looking at it. And because you're grad students, it is also possible, perhaps not likely, but possible you could be thrown out of school for one academic integrity violation. So it could be a very, very serious situation, and if you have to go through it, probably be one of the most stressful things you go through in your entire academic career, maybe even your entire life. Every 5 minutes waiting for an email to come, it's like, oh no, what happened with this plagiarism issue? So I mention this because I've had to deal with it several times, and I don't want to deal with it again. I don't want any of you all to deal So, the issue is plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you copy someone else's work, either from the internet or from another student, and you do not cite that source. You do not put it in quotes and say, this came from Bloomberg, or this came from the Wall Street Journal. If you use, like a rule of thumb, more than 3 words in a row from any other source, then you must put that in quotes and cite that source. Does that make sense? So if you're looking on the New York Times to try to find some information, and you see some information about emotional intelligence, and you copy more than 3 words in a row, you need to put quotes around it and say, I got this from the New York Times. A few mistakes that I've seen students make in the past, I just want to discuss for a minute. I have these 4 items that I've mentioned on page 2. I want to talk about how I think well-meaning students can fall into this trap, either because they're not familiar with plagiarism or for whatever reason. They mean well, but they just fall into this trap. Number 1, sometimes students may copy an internet source just to save time. I realize you're all busy grad students, probably working full-time, going to school. Sometimes it's tempting to say, I'm just going to copy this little blurb on the internet and put it in my emotional intelligence essay. But that's a problem. That's considered plagiarism. Anytime you copy something from an internet source and use it in your paper without putting in quotes and citing it, it's considered an academic integrity violation. And also, it's taking away from your development, your education. So that's definitely something that you want to avoid. Number 2, students may not realize that copying sentences or short paragraphs constitutes plagiarism. So some students may say, well, I thought plagiarism was if I just copy the whole article and call that my essay. That is plagiarism, but also if you copy a single sentence or a single paragraph, that could still constitute plagiarism. So anytime you copy more than 3 words in a row, you want to put quotes around it, say, this is where I got this information, this source. Number 3, I've seen this a few times. Sometimes students who have trouble with English will often look to a written source to find a correct and concise way of stating something, and that's fine. It's fine to look at internet sources to think about how you would say something, a concise way to say something, but you can use that just as a reference only. Cannot actually copy those words and put them into your paper. So if you're confused about the way to say something concisely, grammatically, the way to deliver certain words, you can look to internet sources for guidance. But anytime you actually use those words in your paper for this class, you need to put them in quotes and say where you got those from. Number 4. Some of the writing assignments in this class require a very specific structure. I mentioned I'm going to teach you the structure created by the former head of the Business Communications Department. The mistake I've seen students make in the past is they say, oh, Professor, I thought that the issue was we just follow the structure. I didn't know we needed to create original writing for that structure. Even though there is a specific structure I will be teaching you for these assignments, I still want your original work, your original thoughts, and how you compose those words. So, anyone have any questions on that? I would love it if people do have some questions on that, because I always feel a little weird getting into this kind of a downer conversation right at the beginning. Even still, sometimes I've had students that have confusion later on in the class. So anybody, even if you're familiar with plagiarism, you want to just bring up anything that I've missed, or maybe a different way to look at it? Yeah.
Just a good question. So it says here that you use a software called Safe Assign, just to double check.
Yes.
Has there ever been a coincidence where someone may write a sentence that happens to match something and it's not really direct plagiarism? I mean, is there, does software present any type of confusion?
You know, that's an interesting question. You're saying, like, just coincidentally, could you have said something the exact same way that the Wall Street Journal writer said it? I don't know. think. We're going to talk to some probability people, some statistical people. I've never seen anything like that. And anytime Safe Assign has come up with possible plagiarism issues, it's always just an overwhelming match. It's like there's never any doubt. And I sit down with a student, and they say one of these four things. They say, "Oh, I didn't realize. I thought I was just following the structure, or I didn't know what plagiarism was, or what was the last one? Oh, I was having trouble with English and needed to think about how I would say it, and I just ended up copying more of it than I needed to." But that has crossed my mind, though. But it just it's never came up. If anyone wants to make that argument, they can. Alex, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So do you require like a reference page at the back, listing everything, and if we're not taking information word by word, and just like stumble upon an article, we're basing our information, or still somehow cite it, even if not putting it in quotes?
Yes, you should. Technically, if you get information from an article and you do not copy it word from word, you should still mention at the end, or you could even do it in parentheses in that paragraph, say, this idea was based on something I read on the Morning Star report. You could put your list of references at the end. You could also just put them in parentheses right after the words you take. I'm not a stickler on how you do it, as long as you actually do it. And there's really no references required for anything in this class. I've seen students go through the whole class and not cite any references, not need any references. But if you do end up using some references, then please do either put the reference page in the back or just write in parentheses after you use those words. Any other questions? All right. Great. Thank you for bearing with me through that. Let's see, what else do we have? I think we've gone through everything in the syllabus at this point. All right, and we can dive in with our technical presentation, technical analysis, coursework, classwork for today. All right. I want to start class with a little exercise, thinking about how we would present technical information. So if you turn the page in the slides, I've got some information about iPhones, and I've got some information about Androids. Yes, question. Oh, you need to zoom in. Thank you for your consent. Thank you. Everyone else good? You? Oh, you got two? Oh,
Thank you.
me too. Fantastic. All right. So I'm going to have you momentarily pair up and give each other a little mini presentation about the difference between iPhones and Androids. And I'm going to have you read over this information. I've got some information on screen resolution. I've got some information on camera resolution. I've got some information on processing. And I'm going to have one person just give a little mini presentation explaining the difference between iPhones and Androids. And we're going to think about how we present this very technical information in a compelling manner. So, let me ask you this. How am I going to divide this class up? I was hoping I have a few people who feel familiar with the difference between an iPhone and the difference between an Android. Do I have some smartphone aficionados who feel like confident on that? Like raise your hand if you feel like confident, ready to give this presentation. Raise the hands high. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, perfect. So you're not going to have to do it in front of class. But I'm going to give the 5 of you, I'm going to give you a little audience of 3 or 4 people. And I'm going to ask you to look over this information on screen resolution, camera resolution, processing, And there's also some statistics on that first page with the CPU, dimensions, weight, screen size, screen type. And I'm going to ask you five to just inform your audience about the difference between the iPhone and the Android. Just give them as unbiased, objective information as possible about the difference between these two. All right, I've got Nick, Jameson, what's your name? Saeed, and what's your name? Jim. Okay, and who else raised their hand? Okay, Ricky. Okay. So, why don't, all right, why don't we do this? How about just kind of, all right, so how about we spread out? Like, Saeed, why don't you come here? Jameson, why don't you come here? And then you two kind of stay where you are. And let's just kind of gravitate towards one of those two people. Let me make sure you're grouped evenly. And then I'll give these five people just a minute to you can start reading up what information is necessary. So go ahead and stand up and just gravitate towards one of those five stations. Let me see if I've got an even distribution on this.
You have to stand in front of them.
Yeah. Just kind of stand in front of them. All right, good. So perfect, Mike. You're set there. Alex, you're in good position. All right. So all right. So we need some more people.
Are we just going to use the criteria, or we can kind of...
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. What do we got?
Yeah, that one.
All right, Mike, why don't you come here and listen to Jameson, give him some feedback. All right, we've got 3, 3, 2. Okay. All right, so the instructions for the presenters now are to just give you an unbiased, this is a little bit about the iPhone, this is a little bit about the Android, and the differences. Any questions from the presenters? Okay, so take 2-3 minutes just explaining the differences between these two and try to inform your audience as best you can about this technical information. Go ahead and get started.
So, the bottom line is you're going to get a comparable device. If you look on the chart here, it's PC Magazine, very similar in size, very similar in weight. Maybe a slight difference in holding it, but it's going to be very minor. They have different needs for screens versus the Super AMOLED. The bottom line is one's more of a generic meme, one's more of a special phrase. The big difference with the screen is the number of processors. You'll find that the Android phone shares here in general are more what that does is so in this case, the Android is very shiny. Beyond that, this Android 2.11 is simply a standard Wi-Fi. So as far as no matter where you go, the Bluetooth in the car, 4.2 versus 4.8, they're very similar. And then NFC is near-field communication, basically what enables Android. It's up to the phone. They both have it. You can use your phone anywhere else. You can also transfer this device. Critical feature. Not bad with it. So you overall, again, the Samsung S6 has a slightly larger display. It's a quad HD, should be operating in every site. They're both LCD displays. What you're really going to notice is the higher resolution of the Samsung S6, but what you also need to consider is that it's a more processing power. Samsung's got a more powerful processor, but also requires more battery. It's a much bigger battery. That's why, in general, the iPhone, the Apple devices have that battery. It's just a transition of a super user, and you really want the best of the best. Go for the
All right. Great. Go ahead and start wrapping. About wrapped up.
Yeah.
Presenters. Thank you. All right, stay where you are. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Stay where you are. Okay. All right. So that was our first iteration of this exercise. You just got some basic information about the iPhone and the Android. I'm going to have the presenters do this again one more time, except this time I would like the presenters to pick one that you prefer, either the iPhone or the Android, and try to convince your audience that they should have that phone. All right, that is the phone for them. That is the one you recommend. That is the one you want them to buy and use now and forever. Now, if you are successful at the end, if you are successful at the end of this 2-3 minutes, then everyone in your audience will say, yes, I'm switching to that phone. Yes, I'm going to keep that phone and use it forever. Does that make sense? All right, so presenters, you have a slightly different goal, and you've got 2-3 minutes to convince your audience that they must choose that one. Yes,
And we have to pretend the first communication our meeting just now never happened. This is a clean slate.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You can build on the information that you've already given them, but now you have a specific goal, and I hope you can be successful. All right, go.
There's two types of phones. I believe the device to get is a Samsung device. Wired. The iPhone is personally, the X is more attractive to more fire. Google just got updates very recently. No denying Google you get this you're getting native coming up the bus. Powered by whereas with Apple, they're telling you you need this feature and you get it. The Android, even if you're
Go ahead and wrap it up for the next 30 seconds. Last chance.
So overall, it's really up to you.
Okay, go ahead and wrap things up and gravitate back to your seats. All right, fantastic. So you've now heard 2 iterations of a technical presentation. I would like to talk for a minute about what was the difference between the two of them. Was there one that was more effective in terms of presenting the content than the other? They're both the same. What are your thoughts on that? Anyone have an opinion? how did that affect your reception of the message? Was the information easier to understand? Was the presentation more effective or not?
It really sucks you in to the points they want to make.
Okay, so it's the second one sucked you in.
Jameson did a good job in both, but in the second one where he was advocating for one product, instead of just telling us the technical specs of the two, he told us why that was better. Right?
Yes.
So not the feature, but the reason for the feature.
Okay, so the technical specs, they may not mean as much until we have a goal, until we have a purpose that really sucks you in. Yes.
And the same thing with Jim too. He did a great, both times. But the second time, there was a little bit more emotion in it and feeling because the way he talked about pictures, and so he brought us to how we would use that device and how it would benefit.
Great. All right, so do you want to hear a presentation with emotion and feeling, or do you want to hear a presentation with just numbers? Emotion and feeling. And you brought up another point as well. He talked about how you would use it. What matters to you as the audience?
I was just going to make a point. It was interesting. Jim did a fantastic job. But to first get the facts, so you're not skeptical that someone's just trying to sell you something. So then lead into the emotion just in that order. So you be very.
Okay, did he do that the second time? Did he do facts again and then brought it in, or was it just the way it was set up?
I think it was more the way it was set up because he had more facts the first time. It was an unbiased kind of overview.
Okay.
And then went for his preference after we realized he had quite an extensive knowledge, so we really bought into his view and his.
Okay, good. So he built up his credibility. Excellent. Yes.
Nick did a very good job. I actually said he needed to change professions for himself. He already works for Samsung.
Okay, fantastic.
I like the fact that he didn't tell me anything. He was talking for Galaxy, but he didn't tell me anything negative about the iPhone, which made me trust him more.
Okay, so you build up some trust. Al mentioned building up credibility is important. We've also talked about how we were sucked in with yes.
Oh, I didn't want to.
I stopped abruptly.
I want to give some credit to Saeed too.
Okay.
We're praising everyone, but he did a really good job in terms of he leveled with us first. So he was like, "What do you use your phone for most of the time? Do you play games? Do you use it for social media? What do you take pictures of? Do you take a lot of videos? Do you watch a lot of YouTube videos?" Well, and then he was trying to sell the iPhone to us, and he was giving us all the pros, but at the same time, like he said, he wasn't saying negative things about the Samsung. He was just
Yes. Okay. All right. So some credibility by not saying negative things about the Samsung. What I liked about the first thing you said is he thought about his audience, and then he explained how it benefited you. Again, we don't want just numbers, PCU, screen size, this, that. It's what difference it makes for you. Any other comments on that? Yes.
Also with Saeed, he talked a little bit at the end about the companies and how the operating system pairs with the phone and how Apple is better because they own both. And we said not negative, but Google owns one and Samsung owns the other. So there's a lot of knowledge about the whole process of creating and connecting the phone.
Good. So that's interesting. So again, instead of just statistics, stats, and numbers, it's how does this fit in the overall context, and how does that enhance your experience as a user? So, and we agreed that the second presentation was a little more impactful, was more effective, was better. What's the difference between the second presentation and the first presentation? Well, we have a goal, we have a purpose, we have some passion in this presentation. You're not just standing up here giving someone numbers, you're standing up here with a goal. You want to accomplish something. You want to impart some valuable information in on your audience. And that makes a huge difference in making a presentation. If you ever find yourself giving a presentation and say, I just need to stand up here and read some numbers, present a graph, present some stats, that's probably not going to be a very effective presentation. And I'm sure you all have seen many presentations very much like that. And you might think to yourself, gosh, I wish this person cared about how this technical data related to me. I also wish this person cared about accomplishing something, accomplishing a goal. Because that brings a level of passion and enthusiasm to a presentation that is going to help you. Just because we're talking about numbers, stats, and graphs doesn't mean we need to be boring. Doesn't mean we need to forget about our goal and our purpose. Does that make sense? All right, so that's what's going to carry us through the rest of the night. Goal, purpose, focus. All right. I wanted to mention one thing about anxiety management. Does anyone get nervous when they give a presentation? Yeah. Most people get nervous when they give a presentation. Very common fear. When pollsters ask folks, what's the thing you're most afraid of? Giving a presentation, speaking in public is typically very high. It's typically number one. The number one fear people have. Does anyone know what the number two fear people have is?
Is it death?
Yes, death. All right, so giving a presentation is number one. Dying is number two. All right, people fear giving a presentation more than they fear dying. All right, why do we get so nervous about giving a presentation?
I feel
Alex.
like people are going to judge us and might think of us in a way like it doesn't come out the way we expect it to. They might get the wrong impression.
Yeah, they're going to judge us and judge us in a way that's not accurate, or judge us in a way that's going to be harmful for us socially and professionally. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. We want people to like us, and we want people to be our friends. We don't want to have to hang out by ourselves. I'm going to go. I'll give you a chance to talk later, but that's really it. It comes down to judgment. All right. Socially, we want to have friends. Professionally as well, we're afraid we're going to be judged, and the stakes could be a lot higher. If people don't value what we say, then we may not get this promotion. We may not work here. We may not be able to, feed ourselves, pay our rent. That's stuff that can be very, very stressful. Now, normally the stakes are not as high as we make them out in our minds to be, because it's easy for us to imagine the worst case scenario very, very quickly, and so we get nervous. Our heart starts beating. We are preparing for this very high stakes confrontation. Blood starts going to the muscles, preparing for what is a life or death type of interaction. As we prepare for a presentation, we might think our physical well-being is in jeopardy because our social well-being is in jeopardy, our professional well-being is in jeopardy. And we're preparing for that fight or flight reaction. And that's not the best way to give a presentation. Does anyone have any suggestions, tactics on how they overcome that anxiety, overcome that fight or flight scenario? Yes? Yes, fantastic. So practice is great. Jose?
No memorize. Like if you have to talk about any specific topic, just be yourself in a natural way.
Okay.
Not just
Be yourself. Don't be reading a script, especially if you're reading a script of boring numbers. Right? Don't memorize that. Think about something that's important to you or why it's important to you. I think that's good. It's a good technique. Yes. Other thoughts? Say it.
I use this to realize that everyone else who would be doing this would be as nervous as I am. And that helps me realize like everyone is nervous just like me, so it's not really.
Everyone is nervous, and nervousness actually means you care. It means you care about you doing a good job.
You could say breathing helps a lot. Calming your breathing, you're actually talking.
Yes. So blood is pumping through our veins to our muscles to prepare for this fight. Deep breaths slows that adrenaline reaction down. Jameson.
I'm just being cautious.
Oh, okay. I've had people tell me that before. In fact, I was going to help this psychiatrist with her presentation skills, and she's like, "I'll just prescribe myself some anti-anxiety meds. Don't worry, I'll be good." Okay, so those are all great techniques. One thing that I find helps speakers more than anything is this idea of focusing on purpose, focusing on a goal, focusing on your audience. Essentially, focusing on why you're giving the presentation. Just like we did with that exercise. The first time we said just give your audience the numbers. The second time we said you have a goal. You have a purpose of convincing your audience to buy this. a couple things happen when you focus on your purpose that way. One, you have less space to get nervous. You're so focused on whether or not you're accomplishing that goal. You're so focused on your audience and reading them, trying to interact with them, and giving them the information to make that decision, that you have less time to concentrate on you. Less time to worry about whether or not you're saying the words perfectly. The other thing that happens is you realize that the presentation is about that purpose. It is about that goal. It's not about you and you being judged socially and you being judged professionally. The person you're presenting to is not just waiting there to say, oh, I want to think something negatively about this person socially or professionally. They want valuable information. They want you to accomplish that goal of giving them something important, informing them in a way that they weren't informed before. So I like to say the best way to control anxiety is focus on your purpose. Focus on your goal. It takes your mind off being anxious and reminds you that that is the thing about the presentation that is important to your audience. Just as we did in that last exercise, the goal not only made the presentation more effective, but I venture to say made the presenters a little less nervous. The presenters, would you agree with me on that? Less nervous the second round? Okay. Fantastic. So that's a little bit on anxiety management and how it relates to the exercise we just did, in addition to the fact that it's a useful way to portray that technical information. Okay. So, agenda for the rest of the night, went over our greeting and went over the course overview, sell-tell exercise. We're going to talk in a moment about presenting conclusions, and that's a different way of saying our goal, our purpose. I'm going to have a discussion with you. I'm going to ask you about presenting conclusions, and the types of conclusions you might present as a business student, and how that can be the central purpose to your presentation. We'll talk about PowerPoint, how we can design it in a way that's going to be easiest for our audience to understand. We'll talk about something I call PowerPoint competition, which is the idea you want your audience focused on you. You don't want them looking up at your PowerPoint slides when you're trying to give them important information. If they are, it creates this interesting competition. Your audience is looking at your PowerPoint and wants to look at you. How can we avoid that? How can we work with PowerPoint instead of competing with PowerPoint? Talk about transitions. This is just simple transitions going from one topic to the next. So I was talking about finance, now I'm talking about marketing. How can we do that in a way that keeps our audience engaged, keeps our audience with us, and doesn't confuse them? Visual aids, graphs, tables, what type of visual aids we can use, and how we can present them as a presenter. We'll talk a little bit about jargon, industry terms that might be confusing your audience, how you can think about not using them, and how you can think about explaining jargon carefully if you have to use it. We'll talk about some content enhancements, what you can do to spruce up your presentation, in particular in preparation for your technical presentation, which is a week from tonight, what sort of things you can do to make it a little more interesting. I will go over your technical presentation assignment, make sure you're clear about what you need to do between now and next week. And then lastly, we will do these team graph presentations that I mentioned earlier. I will give you some data. I will have you team up in teams of 4 or 5. You will look at some data, think about putting it into some sort of visual aid that we have discussed, and think about how you can present a valuable conclusion, what that conclusion is, how you can use some of the techniques we're going to discuss in the next hour in that presentation. So that's the overview for the rest of the night. With that, I'm going to start right in with this presenting conclusions idea. So let me ask you, what types of presentations do you do as an RBS student, either as a student or in your jobs? Right? What types of presentations are important to the lives of an RBS students, and what sort of goals do you have with those presentations? Give me some thoughts on that. What type of presentations do you do? What are your goals in giving those presentations?
So regularly at my job, I'm responsible focus on the top opportunities and identify any trends in our pipeline, whether it's increasing or decreasing, to increase just sales within the store. We're able to hit our targets based on the goal.
Oh, okay. So you're condensing this information down, and you need to.
So the goal is to make them aware of what our current top business opportunities are, and then extrapolate what we need to go and close those.
Oh, okay. So summary presentations and make your audience aware of what the opportunities are. So that's your goal, or that's your conclusion would be: this is the business opportunity that's important for us. Oh, other.
For me, I'm an engineer, so deal with a lot of very technical.
Okay.
I don't know, a lot of content that's very technical. So
Okay, good. I like
the
it.
challenge is trying to get that across without putting people to sleep.
Okay.
And for them to be able to grasp it.
Good. So what would you say your goal is in a lot of those presentations?
Try to get to the point, not make it too worrying. Just try to keep their attention.
Oh, okay. So try to keep their attention, but I guess I need more. Like, what are you trying to give them information? Are you trying to convince them of something?
Usually teach them something.
Teach them something. Okay, so it's important by the end of this presentation, they need to know how this information works or what it means to them. Good. Alex.
In my role, I have to do a lot of presentations that work in consolidations. So I create a budget and I maintain a budget and I forecast it out. So my responsibility is to set the tone for all the budget owners that report their information to me. So I have to present a timeline, give them deliverable dates, explain any updates or changes to our systems or to our processes. So trying to bring everyone together to collaborate on a timeline that works for everyone is one of my challenges. And then once all the everything is analyzed, I then present it to the CFO and to the leadership team. So I have presentations pretty much giving guidance on one end, and on the other end, summing up everything that I put together.
Okay. So fantastic. So there's the logistical aspect of you getting everyone on the same page initially, and then once all that is condensed, summing up and showing the important takeaways to someone else. Yeah. Renu?
We do a lot of in-services with our customers, usually physicians,
Okay.
about the features and benefits of the devices that we offer.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Good. All right. The point I like to make at this point in the presentation is that there's a lot of the times when you all are making presentations, you're going to be summing up, you're going to be giving conclusions, you're going to have a specific purpose to inform, to teach. You, as business students, are typically not the folks who are just going to be listing information. You're typically not the folks who are going to be saying, well, here's the pros and cons, and that's it. You decide. As business students, people are going to look to you more and more as, you tell me what's important. You tell me which phone I should buy. You tell me what the important takeaway is. All right? You tell me what the good, the positive features are of this product. Would you agree that you're more in that role and people look to you more for conclusions rather than just data? So, I like to stress this point, that in this class, we want to think about presenting conclusions. We want to think about presenting the end summation. All right? We're not in a position, typically, where we're just listing data or we're listing information. And we're going to spend the rest of the class, or a good chunk of the class, thinking about how we present those conclusions. So, conclusions. All right, got a definition? Just so we're all on the same page. It's judgment, decision, reached by reasoning. As Alex pointed out, he's going to gather all this information and he's going to say, this is the conclusion. This is the takeaway. All right, and I want to encourage you to think less and less of yourself as the person who just lists data and more of the person who presents the valuable, important conclusions, the takeaways. A couple examples to make sure we're all on the same page of what I mean when I say conclusion. Take a look at these examples. Tell me if you think these are good conclusions, not so good conclusions. All right. Investing in the pipeline project will put our company at an unacceptable level of risk. Do you like that as a good conclusion? Yes. Yes. The data set shows an upward trend of 4%. No. Tell me what it means. Tell me what it means for our business opportunities. Tell me what it means for our company. I have 6 years of accounting experience, and I've completed my CPA. What do you say? What does she want?
She wants to explain her experience.
Okay.
She's trying to convince somebody that she can do the job.
Okay. Okay, how about this? I'm an excellent candidate for the job. Is that a good conclusion, though? All right. Let me tell you where I'm going with this, and then we'll see if you can see it my way, or just pretend for this class period. I like this as the conclusion. All right. I want someone standing up explaining why they're an excellent candidate for the job, how they're going to help me do my job, how they're going to help my company, how they're going to take their experience, be an excellent candidate for the job. I do not want someone to just list their experience at me and leave it to me to think about how that relates to this job in this role. So you can, I understand there's different interpretation of the finer points, but that's where I'm going with this section of the material. Is that fair? All right. So conclusions. What's the conclusion? What's the takeaway? I want to know it. I want you to be clear about it in your head before you even start to think about how you're going to construct this presentation. What is the conclusion? You, as the smart MBA student, are going to need to inform me. Strong conclusion. All right, so we want a conclusion. What's going to make our conclusion strong? Any ideas? Relatable and convincing. Yes. Anything else? What else do we need for evidence? Some evidence. Why are you an excellent candidate for the job? Why is this the right business opportunity? So support, evidence. I like the word premises. Same thing as support, evidence. The reason I like that word is I like to steal something I learned from my philosophy class in college. The only thing I remember from my philosophy class in college was that strong conclusions have accurate premises that logically lead to that conclusion. Strong conclusions, the evidence, the premises, they're accurate, and they logically lead to that conclusion. Right? So we want strong evidence, and we want it to be logical. We don't want anyone to say, well, your evidence is good, but it just doesn't make sense with your conclusion. I want you to be clear in your head that you're standing up to give a conclusion, and I want you to logically think about how your premises support that. Premises is just evidence support. I'm using that term because I'm stealing from my philosophy class. Logical argument. The truth of this conclusion is a consequence of the premises. Has anyone heard that before? The truth of the conclusion is a consequence of the premises. So you list the premises, and then you frame it in such a way that, well, the conclusion is obvious. I almost don't need to say it, but I do need to say it because I want to be clear about it. A couple examples, just so we're all on the same page, of premise. The data shows an upward trend of 4%. Is that a good premise? Could be. All right, that's what I'm going for. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Premise. It's just a fact. And you're going to tell me the conclusion in a moment. I have 6 years of accounting experience, and I've completed my CPA. That is a great premise. Now, you're going to tell me how that leads to the conclusion that you're an excellent candidate for the job. All right, let's put the premise together, and let's make a logical conclusion. Let me give you an example of a logical conclusion. See if you agree. Is this logical? Is this not? The job candidate has great quantitative skills, so I recommend that we offer her the job. Is that a good logical conclusion. Sounds okay. Is there some missing evidence? Is there some missing premise in this?
And then what he's saying, acquiring skills are very important in the job.
Yes. What if the job is being a furniture mover? Right? What if the job is, I don't know, something else that does not require quantitative skills? So those are the pieces that I want you to be clear about when you give your presentation. And maybe you'll say something like this. Quantitative skills are the best way to assess job candidates for this role. Candidate X has the best quantitative skills. Those two premises, the truth of the conclusion is a consequence of those two premises. So, I recommend that we offer her the job. Alright, so that's what I mean by having that clear conclusion in your head, using good premises, and making sure that they logically support that. Now, as we present technical information, we don't want to forget these basics. We want to have those fundamentals in place before we start even layering on that information that could be confusing. If you have these conclusions clearly delineated in your head before you even start your presentation, it will help you in a number of ways. It will help you think about what content you want to include to support that conclusion. If you look back at the information on the iPhone and the Samsung stuff, there's a lot of data there. And when your presenters had that goal to try to convince you to buy something, they selectively thought about which pieces of that data they could pull. They didn't use it all. They would have lost you. Or you wouldn't have had time to listen to their whole presentation. They thought about what was important. They thought about what they could include, what they could not include. They also may have thought about the order in which they want to present that information, right? Because they know their goal is to conclude by saying you should buy this phone. So which pieces of information am I going to include first, last? All right, that process will help you think through where you want to emphasize, where you want to de-emphasize, where you organize, gaining confidence and brevity. I mentioned this last point. What I mean by that is sometimes I'll coach folks who just ramble on and on and on. And I'll tell them, well, let's think about what your conclusion is. And let's think about how you can create a logical argument to support that conclusion. And then once you've done that, you can stop talking. Right? Right? Confidence and brevity. All right. We've talked about why conclusions are important to you as smart MBA students. We've talked about how they can help you construct your presentation in your head before you even start it. Now we'll talk about how you present these conclusions during a presentation. First thing I want to ask is, if we have this conclusion in our head, do we actually need to say it out loud? Can we just assume it's obvious? But the truth of the conclusion is, how did I say that? The truth of the conclusion is a consequence of the premise. So can we just assume it speaks for itself? No. We have to actually say it. Maybe it speaks for itself because of our knowledge of the industry. It speaks to us because we have a level of expertise that our audience does not have. But it does not speak to them the same way. So you actually want to say it. You want to say the conclusion is you should buy the iPhone. The conclusion is I'm an excellent candidate for this job. Don't let it speak for itself. Don't assume it's obvious. I mentioned this concept of consider assuming agreement. Sometimes folks will tell me, you know what, this premise stuff, it's just so obvious to everyone. I don't even want to say it out loud, or the conclusion is so obvious to everyone. I don't want to say it out loud because they're going to think that I think they don't know that. So I recommend using a technique I call assuming agreement. You could say, as we all know, we are coming out of a recession. As we are aware of, sales are down in this product line. Right? It's important for you to actually verbalize the premise or the conclusion. If you feel like it's going to be too obvious, you can use this technique. Consider assuming agreement. As you know, as you can see, okay, so we must say it. We must say our conclusion. Question is, how do you present that conclusion verbally? How do you present that conclusion non-verbally, with physicality, eye contact, movement? Let's start with verbally. How do we do something so complicated as verbally present our conclusion? What are some ways we could do it?
Well, I find one of the easiest ways is to actually lead with in conclusion.
Yes. I like that too. Based on the data, the conclusion is. Just say very simple keywords like that. It's easy to forget this stuff when you're presenting, you're nervous, maybe all the data is familiar to you, so you think, you forget where you are. But use some of those keywords for your audience so they know where you are. The conclusion is, what we can tell from this, what we take away, the interpretation, simple stuff, but very important, very impactful. Non-verbal. Any ways you can think of how we could non-verbally show our audience we're getting to the important part, that this is the valuable conclusion? We could utilize a pause. We could pause right before the conclusion. And our audience says, wow, she's about to say something really important. Pause after the conclusion. The audience kind of wakes up and say, oh, that was the important thing. That was the technique. We tend to speak very fast when we present. We have a different level of anxiety than our audience has. You might be nervous and want to get it out fast. Utilize pauses frequently. Slow down, especially when you're getting to the important concluding statements. You can decrease the rate of your speech as you're going through the evidence, the premises. You may speak fast. All right, this is what Bloomberg says, this is what Morningstar says, but here's the takeaway. Decrease that rate of speech, cues your audience in, there's something important I need to listen to. Casual tone, relaxed posture. So similarly, if I'm going through premises and I'm just listing them quickly, I may have a formal business-like tone and an upright posture. And then I may relax for a minute. I may shift in movement. I may walk to the other side of the room and say, okay, that's all the data. I want you to be clear about what the conclusion is, what the takeaway is. Visual aid, just a PowerPoint slide that says the conclusion is critical and simple. All right. Presenting conclusions. What else do I have? Presenting premises, verbally, non-verbally. All right, so presenting conclusions is the main thing I'm going to stress in this class, and the exercise you're going to do later. I'm going to say, did you present that conclusion effectively or not effectively? But premises, we can go through the same type of argument. This is the data that is supporting our argument, the data that is supporting what we have to offer. And you're going to say, you're going to list facts. You may say, this is what Morningstar says, this is what the Wall Street Journal says. You may throw in some of your opinions during this presentation of the premises. I don't want you to think that you're just listing facts during that point and you have to wait until the conclusion before you say your opinion. You can mix it in with your opinion, of course. You may want to use the assumed agreement technique. If you feel it's very important that everyone understands that we're coming out of a recession and that's why we're facing this issue, but you don't want to feel like you're talking down to anyone, you can say, as you know, as you're aware of, as everyone understands. All right, so those are some ways you can present the initial evidence. Non-verbally, in terms of what you do with your posture and your body language. I mentioned for the conclusions, non-verbally, you might slow down or pause. Now, I'm not going to tell you to speed up when you're presenting premises. If anything, I would want you to slow down during all parts of your presentations, but especially during the conclusion. But one thing I will mention, a non-verbal technique you can use when you're listing the support, the premises, is what I call a presentation motif. I'm going to read you this definition and then I'll explain it in a minute, because it sounds complicated when I give you the definition, but it's really very, very simple. A presentation motif is a recurring verbal or physical action used to illustrate a parallel relationship between sections of a presentation. So if I have 3 sections of support, I'm going to explain the finance, the marketing, and the operations, and I'll explain how that all means our company is going bankrupt. All right, so finance, marketing, operations. I just used a presentation motif. I listed on my fingers 1, 2, 3. And as I go through those points, you realize, oh, he's moving on to the second point. He's moving on to the third point of equal importance in a parallel relationship. I could use another physical motion. I could say, all right, this is point 1. And when I get ready for point 2, I'd say, all right, point 2. All right, now we're moving on to point 3. It's just a visual cue which can help your audience. You could also use slides, like premise 1, premise 2, premise 3. It's a visual technique that will help you move through your presentation. Okay. Conclusion placement. All right, so we've talked about the importance of the conclusion. We've talked about how you might clarify when you're presenting it verbally, non-verbally. I want to ask you now, where might we put our presentation conclusion? Would we put it at the beginning of our presentation? Put it at the beginning, middle, or end? And before I throw that question to you, I want to mention a concept that communication experts note in terms of when the audience is paying the most attention and when the audience tends to zone out. So let me draw your attention to this data, which I will call communication experts call the attention-retention curve. If we look at this graph, we can see time on the horizontal axis. All right, we've got the beginning of our presentation, the middle of our presentation, and the end of our presentation. On the vertical axis, we've got the audience attention and retention. How much the audience is paying attention to us, how much the audience is retaining. All right, at the top we've got 100%, which is a lot of attention, a lot of retention, 50% and zero attention. Now this is not scientific, these numbers are not exact, but communication experts, including the one I borrowed this graph from, Mission Communication, feel that this is a good estimate of how your audience is absorbing what you're doing based on the time of your presentation. So, can someone take a look at that graph and explain to me what's going on? What's the takeaway?
The audience is paying the most attention at the beginning and the end of your presentation.
Exactly. Everyone see that? Would you agree with the intuition there? As you start your presentation, your audience is like, oh, all right, who's this person? What do they have that's valuable to me? As your presentation goes on, naturally, they can't focus 100% the whole time. But as you end your presentation, your audience will say a number of things. They might say, oh, now they're going to get to the important part, so I better pay attention. They might be so thankful that your presentation is almost over. So they're like, oh, okay, now I can perk up and pay attention. So given that natural phenomena, when the audience is more likely to pay the most attention, where might we want to place our conclusion?
The beginning and the end?
Yes, I like it. The beginning and the end. I recommend you start off with a clear statement of your conclusion. Let your audience know where you're going. I also recommend you utilize that time at the end to clarify, reiterate your conclusion. I've seen many presentations just end. So the presenter will go through the slides, they'll be like, they'll keep talking, and then they'll look up and like, oh, I guess that's it. So, and what happens is they just wasted that time. All right, at the end of your presentation, they had our focus, they had our attention, they had an opportunity to say, this is the important thing. And if they even say, all right, I'm about to wrap things up, we will naturally, oh, okay, they're about to wrap things up, what are they going to say? Our attention is highest at that point. So reiterate at the end, start off with a clear statement at the beginning is my recommendation. Any questions on that? Comments on that?
Well, what if you're doing like storytelling and you want to keep the suspense going in?
Okay. That could be a worthwhile technique, and I've seen it done successfully sometimes. I would use that carefully, though. I would also recommend, when possible, you tell your audience where you're going up front, because they're going to want to know how your presentation is valuable to them right off the bat. Why am I listening to this person? All right, this person is going to tell me I should invest in China. All right, well, okay, that's the conclusion. Now prove it to me. I'm going to be listening very carefully for how all the information you give me relates to invest in China. If you want to do a storytelling technique with invest in China, they might be wondering where you're going the whole time, how it relates to them, and they might have trouble categorizing that information. Have you ever listened to someone tell a story or tell you something, and the whole time you're wondering, like, how does this relate? What am I supposed to do with all of this information? I don't know what it means. But if you tell them ahead of time, this is where I'm going, they say, oh, okay, so that says, population is growing, government regulations, trade, yada, yada. Okay, it all makes sense to where you're going. All right, so we're going to move on from conclusions. I think we are good there. And we're going to talk about PowerPoints. We're going to talk about, first, how to avoid PowerPoint competition. I mentioned this idea when you're giving a presentation. Your audience may be looking at your PowerPoint slides and not looking at you. That's a problem. Now, if it's possible that you can give your audience all the information they need just with your PowerPoint slides. In which case, you would just give your audience the PowerPoint slides and they don't need to listen to you, right? Right? If they could just read your PowerPoint slides, then you don't need to give a presentation. So I might say, why waste their time with the presentation? Why not be efficient and just say, here's the information you need? All right, but more often than not, your audience is going to want to hear from you, the person who researched it, to shed some light on this data, put this data in context, build some credibility, build some trust, convince them of the important conclusions. Comment.
Yeah, quick question. A lot of the presentations that I do are over the phone now, because people work remotely. So our PowerPoints are on the screen. So would it be a good idea to kind of talk a little bit about it before and then show the screen after? Because otherwise, while the screen is up, maybe they're not paying attention to you and you can't really tell. They're just looking at the screen and they might miss important information.
Yeah, let's talk. I'm going to give you some ideas right now, but let's continue talking about this as I work through these slides. My first thought is what you don't want is a PowerPoint slide with very dense language, sentences, paragraphs on that PowerPoint slide, where your audience, as they're on the phone, can just read that paragraph while they should be listening to you talk. What you might want instead are a few concise titles, a few concise words. Like the benefits of investing in China are population growth, government regulation, tax, whatever. So your audience on the phone can see where you're going with this conversation. They can use the PowerPoint to guide them so they don't get confused, but they have to listen to you for clarity. That'd be my initial thought. All right, so a couple of techniques, and that's going to be one of them. Concise bullet points on PowerPoint slides is going to be very helpful for you for controlling this presentation. Another technique, talk to the audience. So face the audience and talk to the audience. You do not want to face the slide the whole time and just have the conversation like this. So as you can see, this is where China is growing, yada, yada. I'm losing your attention by failing to make eye contact. I look like a joke because you're just seeing the back of my head. And I'm missing an opportunity to just connect with you and tell you how passionate I feel that this is the right opportunity, that this is the important conclusion. Number 2, touch, turn, talk. This is a technique developed by 3M, company 3M. And this is a useful technique sometimes when a presenter will try to do a bunch of things at once. I will recommend they use this technique called touch, turn, talk. How it works is this, is that you do those 3 things one at a time. Touch means you click to the next bullet point. Turn means you look at the slide, remind yourself what's on the slide, and you turn back to the audience. Talk is that you talk. Just talk to the audience. The key to this technique is you do one at a time. You do not click, talk, turn, and then as you're turning, talk. We can't do it all the time. You'll see me do it sometimes. But if I find a presenter who is just kind of back and forth, their head keeps going back and forth, and they're talking as they're clicking through the slide, I will sometimes say, remember that 3M technique? One thing at a time. Click to the next slide. Turn, look, remind yourself what you need to talk about, and then talk. Focus on the audience when you talk. And if you forget what you need to say next, don't try talking as you turn your head and look and say, oh, now I remember what I need to say next. Stop. Okay. The other thing I need to talk about is this. Question.
What if you're really data-rich slides? A lot of numbers, quantitative information, stuff that you can't just look at and convey completely accurately.
I would say keep this technique in mind and think about when you can use it. For example, if you have a very data-rich slide, you may click to the slide, have a moment with your audience. All right, the important thing about this data is the conclusion, boom, 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 boom. Connect with your audience. Now, I have to turn back to the slide, and I have to work through it, and I may have to have my back to you some of that time. That's just the way it is. You can't use all of these techniques for everything all of the time. All right, touch, turn, talk, develop by 3. Blank screen. Often there's a button on the remote where you can make the screen go blank. Now, you can't look at the PowerPoint now. You're just looking at me. I have your complete attention. This is an awesome visual cue that I'm about to say something important, or that I want you to focus on me, because I'm the one who stayed up till 4 in the morning working on this evidence or this data, and I'm the one who's going to tell you why the important conclusion relates to you. Blank screen, very effective technique for avoiding PowerPoint competition. Stand to the left. So stand to the left of your slides. Why would that be helpful for your audience in absorbing your PowerPoint slides?
Because we read from left to right.
Yes. Okay, we read from left to right, but how does that help?
So it takes it, they focus on you first and then they, yeah.
Yes. All right, we read from left to right, so your audience will look at you first, then they will look at your PowerPoint slides, and as they get to the end of the line, their eye will just naturally jerk back to the left, and they'll look at you again. So they'll look at you, read the slide, and then look at you to explain further. It can be a useful technique. It can make a significant difference. You don't have to use it all the time. You can't use it all the time. But something to keep in mind as a number of things in your tool belt. Entrance effects. By entrance effects, I mean these animations. So when I'm ready to talk about something, I click to that point and I explain it. If I had to have everything on my slide, and I was trying to talk to you right now about entrance effects, might your mind be somewhere else? Would you be looking up at the screen saying, wow, gosh, what is that last thing? Overture the slide. I wonder what he's going to say about that. Let me take some thoughts on that, or maybe I'll send this text message. Entrance effects help you clarify where you are in your presentation and help keep your audience focused on what you need to deliver. And last thing, overture the slide. If you cannot use entrance effects, you cannot use these animations, for some reason you have to have everything up all at once, I recommend you use a technique called overture the slide, which means give your audience an overview of the whole slide before you start talking about each point. So if I had to put this slide up, I might say, okay, here's 6 techniques for avoiding PowerPoint competition. I'm going to tell you about how talking to the audience is important. We're going to go over the 3M technique. I'm going to show you the blank screen technique. I'm going to talk about standing to the left and the psychology with that. I'm going to talk about entrance effects. And lastly, I'll conclude with overture the slide. Now that I've given you an overture of where I'm going with the slide, let me draw your attention back to the top bullet point. So by reading those points to you, I have satisfied your curiosity to an extent of where I'm going and what's on the slide. Naturally, you might start to read it without me. So if I'm trying to talk to you about how important it is to talk to the audience, your mind is going to be looking at those bullet points further down, and I'm going to have some competition there. But by overturing the slide, I can lessen that. Question?
No, not a question, just a statement, I guess, or an observation. You actually did the same thing in the very beginning of this slide, and I was like, I really appreciate the fact that he just listed the whole thing, because now I get an idea of the rest of the PowerPoint, what I'm going to be expecting from this.
All right. So
Like-
so it works.
No, it's cool because everything that you're going over here, you're pretty much doing, and I think we're all able to kind of notice that.
Okay. All right. Good. And you can call me on it if I don't actually do it. But insight. Thank you.
Sometimes you have presentations where you're not standing in front of people. So a lot of times we do presentations where everyone's sitting down.
Okay.
The person presenting is actually in the back of the room presenting on a laptop, but everyone's looking at the screen.
Okay.
So you can engage through looking at people. Half the time people aren't looking at you, they're looking up at the slide. Sometimes they'll turn to look at you. The purpose is not to look at you, it's to look at the slide. So, these techniques are great when you are presenting in front of people, but what do you do in that case? Because if we have this situation a lot, probably the majority of our presentation, the person's not standing up in front of people.
Okay. Yeah. Again, we can keep talking about this as the quarter goes on. There are various techniques you can still use. Conclusion techniques. You can say, as you can see from the slide, the important thing with this conclusion or the important thing with this data is the conclusion. And we'll see on the next slide. So do your best to control the conversation using those techniques. I would also just say, remember why you're there. You're there to clarify, you're there to inform, you're there to add something. Something that they will not get by just reading the slides. Think about what that is and try to play that role to the best of your ability using these techniques as the physical limitations allow. So you truly want to make them understand. So let me truly make you understand. So let me draw your attention to this point, or this point. All right. So I'm going to give you some examples of entrance effects. A couple of PowerPoint slides for us to look at and discuss. Suppose I were to give you this presentation from the Small Business Administration about the 504 loan program, and I'm going to talk to you about eligible project costs for this loan program. All right, there's real estate, machinery and equipment, soft costs, and refinancing. I could just put all of that up at once, but there's some other ways I might suggest you do it using entrance effects. For example, if I was going to present the same information, I might have the title at the top, the customized footers at the bottom, just put things in context, and then bring things in one at a time. Let's talk about real estate with this loan program. Let's talk about machinery and equipment. Let's talk about soft costs. Let's talk about refinancing. It's one way you could do it to use entrance effects. Another way you could do it is you could break it down each one. If I'm going to talk about real estate, I don't want you looking at this addition, major event, renovation while I'm trying to talk about existing buildings. So I'm going to bring stuff in one at a time. Say real estate. All right. Existing buildings. Additional major renovation. All right. Now let's talk about machinery and equipment. All right. The two things under that. I could do it like that. That's another option. Or suppose I want to do it a different way. Suppose I'm going to talk to you about these costs, and I'm going to give you the 4 big categories of eligible costs. Real estate, machinery and equipment, soft costs, and refinancing. All right, those are the 4 big things we're going to talk about in this slide. Now let's focus in on real estate. Blah, 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 blah about real estate. Now let's focus in on machinery and equipment. Blah, blah, blah about machinery and equipment. So on and so forth. Question? Sure. I've seen it. Yeah. I've seen it. Yeah. Hopefully you won't make the mistake of using something crazy where you have like a bouncing thing or maybe like a twirling thing. I've seen those. There has to be a reason for that. If it's some sort of gimmick to get the attention that relates to the content, fine. But if not, be careful with that. And one takeaway from this, I guess we haven't really discussed it yet, but is how do you all like this? How do you like these different versions? All right, do you like the one at a time, or do you like the big 4 top categories followed by the details? This is a little less animation than everyone one at a time. And I like this last iteration of it. So it gives you the overview and then fills in the details. So maybe the one at a time might be too much animation. There's a balance you need to think carefully about. Any other questions? Yes.
One more question.
Yes.
Back to the other side where you talked about standing to the left of your slide.
Yeah.
Sometimes people advise that you use your presentation space to move around to make your presentation more effective. Now, is that a true thing? Like, is that impactful, or is it more distracting for your audience because they're just following around the room and they're trying to focus on the slide?
Yeah, this stand to the left is just a tool I want you to think about having in your tool belt. It's not going to be feasible all the time, nor do I want you standing in the corner the whole time. Right? I want you coming out and engaging the audience, thinking about ways to capture their attention that way. But if you find yourself at a slide where it's perhaps very data rich, perhaps you need to approach the slide for some reason, but you still want to keep the audience focused on you, you might use a stand to the left technique there. All right. Great. Let's, I'm gonna keep going because we are gonna have, how are we doing for time here? We are 7:30. All right, I'm gonna keep, what I'd like to do, and if you need a break, we can take a quick break, but what I'd like to do instead is spend another 20 or so minutes finishing up the material, and then get you started on the team exercise, and you can kind of take a break as needed that way. Is everyone okay? We keep going another 25 minutes, all set? All right, fantastic. So we talked about avoiding PowerPoint competition, and I'm going to talk a little bit about design. I could talk forever about design, but I'm not, because I just gave myself a limit of 25 minutes. I'm going to give you some greatest hits, things I've seen about designing a PowerPoint presentation that are going to be very impactful, and things I recommend you keep in mind for engaging your audience. First, engaging, undistracting template. Choosing your template, choose something that will engage your audience, but not to the point where it becomes too distracting. You don't want fancy designs on the template that are unnecessary. You don't want something that's going to distract your audience. I like this template. I use it a lot. It's a white with a little bit of clouds around the outside. So it has just a little bit of a professional feel to it, but not so much that it distracts your audience. So something engaging but undistracting. Concise, incomplete text. All right, we talked about this earlier, I think, when I answered Alex's question. What was the takeaway there? Why do you think I'm telling you now I want concise, incomplete text on your PowerPoint slides? Yes?
You're not writing paragraphs. It doesn't have to be a whole sentence.
Okay, so just to the point, yes. So I definitely don't want a paragraph. There's a little, that's great. There's a little bit more to it. Renee?
Because you want the audience's attention on you and not the...
Yeah, that's the main thing. I want the audience's attention on me. I don't want them to have the ability to just read everything I'm going to say, because it's important that I guide them through this and tell them the important conclusions, for whatever reason. So concise, incomplete text. I like a 5x3 rule of thumb. Maximum of 5 bullet points, 3 words across. It's just a rule of thumb. You don't have to follow it all the time. But if you find yourself constantly in violation of that rule, I recommend you think about why. And is it really necessary that you have all that text on your slides? Parallel structure. All right, what do I mean by parallel structure? Look, first let me warm you up here. What I mean by parallel structure is I want all of these bullet points to be in parallel structure. So what does that mean? Does anyone know? Can anyone fill us in?
Sub-tab, I guess?
What's that?
Not sub-tabbing, like more information underneath each tab.
Oh, okay. What I mean by parallel structure is each of these bullet points is the same part of speech. They're all nouns, they're all verbs, or they're all similarly structured. I might have, and we can see, these are all nouns. Engaging, undistracting template, concise, complete text, 5x3 rule, parallel structure. It's not noun, engaging, concise, 3x5 rule, and if I were to write here, it's better to use parallel structure, or using parallel structure. That would be a different format, grammatically, than the other bullet points. I think we'll talk more about this when we talk about writing, but Yeah, let me see if I can think of a couple examples right off the top of my head. If I'm going to give a PowerPoint design about investing in China, I might have bullet points about geography, population, regulations. All right, those might be my 3 bullet points. I do not want geography, population, involvement in government spending, whatever. That's like I have 2 concise nouns and then I have 1 long sentence. I want everything in a parallel structure. Does that make sense? All right. Customized slides. What I mean by customized slides, footer at the bottom that relates to your audience, possibly a header, something that frames this slide to your audience so they remember why you're giving them the presentation, how it relates to them. One small tool among many that can make your audience feel like they're more involved in this presentation and it's more for them. Topic in top line. Now, a lot of times, folks I work with, they hear me stress conclusion, conclusion, conclusion so much, so they're tempted to put the conclusion in the top line. And that can be a little bit jarring, because that's not the way we're used to receiving information. We are used to seeing PowerPoint slides with a good customized header footer and a topic in the top line, and now you're ready to think about some things that are going to help you with PowerPoint design, and I'm going to give you those via animation effects. You don't want to often, sometimes there are exceptions to this, but typically you won't have, here's the conclusion right in the top line of the PowerPoint slide, even though that is the important part of your presentation. Okay, let's look at a couple examples. Let's think about these 6 things, whether these examples you think are good representations of these PowerPoint design techniques or bad representations. So let's take a look at a couple examples. Glance at this slide. Tell me if you think it's well designed, not well designed. If so, why is it not well designed?
Poorly designed.
Poorly designed. Why?
I can't read the stuff after you read.
Oh, okay. You can't read this stuff, right? Okay. All right. So this person tried to get fancy with the white text, but it's very important that we're able to read it. What else?
Way too many words.
Too many words. Too many words. This was when I had a student give a presentation of their resume, their job qualifications, and this student actually put the whole job description on the PowerPoint design. It was just too many words. We just want some concise points so we can look to that person to explain it for us. What else? Yes?
Distractive with the picture and reading, it's like kind of lose focus over there.
Okay. Fair enough. Distracting?
It's too big. I mean, if a small picture would be fine, but it's too big.
Okay. Jim?
A lot of grammar errors.
Yes, there's a lot of grammar errors, and one thing I'll point out is there's some violations of parallel structure here. All right, we've got assisted and respond. All right, this is past tense, and this is present tense. Also, you can see at the top, lead technical intern. So that is the job description. And these bullet points that come underneath are the responsibilities. So that is a violation of parallel structure. We're expecting things that look visually the same to be the same types of information. So we want a differentiation here with the job title between the job description. Does that make sense? All right, how about this one? Back to the Small Business Administration 504 loan program. What do you think about the design of this PowerPoint slide? Like it? Don't like it? Not much there. All right, so that means you like it, you don't like it.
I just feel like it's underutilized.
Underutilized. Okay, Nick, what do you think?
It's just it's a little too broad and there's a lot of white space that just seems like it's not very engaging.
Okay. Anyone want to speak up in defense of this slide and say it's not bad, Jim?
I think this is a good slide because my first question is, okay, well, what kind of experience and okay, what kind of, I guess, credit scores and how much collateral, and those questions are going to force me to listen to you as the presenter, or maybe even ask you as the presenter, okay, like, what do you need here?
Yeah, so this is what I'm going for in this slide. There's enough to guide you with what I might be talking about, and it forces you to listen to me. Now, granted, it could be improved. Maybe there's a little bit too much white space. Maybe it could be a little more fancy. But this is what I'm going for, with concise, incomplete bullet points. Our audience is not going to get confused. They're going to know where I'm going, and what's left, they just listen to me. And that's what I want as a presenter. All right, any questions on that? Yes, Saeed.
In my case, like, if I were to make this, I would have probably used number list as a bullet list. Is there like a reason to use bullet and not use numbers? Or
Anyone have an opinion on that? It depends. Really? Anyone seen examples of numbers that worked well, didn't work well? It varied? Yeah.
I think if the items are all equally important or equal priority, I use bullets. But if they come in certain sequence or there's certain, like, they have higher priority, I use numbers.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. I would say for most of my slides, I do not use numbers because they're all concepts. I'm not trying to list a sequence. I'm trying to list concepts. So numbers might even be unnecessary distraction. Yeah. So unless there's a good reason for numbers, I would say use bullets. Yes.
So how does this apply when you're when the deck itself is gets distributed afterwards, right? This is not helpful to the audience, and most of the slide decks we end up preparing at work are supposed to have some afterlife to go around.
Yes, I've dealt with this question before, and there are a number of different options. You can create a separate takeaway deck. Another thing you could use is you could use animation effects, and under each of these bullet points have a paragraph that fills in after you discuss it. So this could be my first slide that comes up as my audience is watching, and then I explain experience, credit, collateral, revenue, and then just as I'm finishing up, just as I'm moving on to the next slide, I click 4 times, or 1 time, and in comes the paragraphs that I didn't want my audience to read while they were talking to me. That, I think, is probably the most powerful option.
I usually save it as a PDF document to send out to my customers.
Okay.
So I have a lot of notes in the notes section, and I don't really want them to see the notes section, so I usually just save it in the PDF document, which excludes the notes.
Yeah, that's fine. And the question was, do we want to include a lot in this PDF that we're sending out, and maybe we have to for legal reasons, and that's fine, in which case I'd recommend the animation technique. What do you think of that? Yeah, that's my favorite of the options. Good. Any questions? Other questions for you? All right. We're going to talk now about transitions. Transitioning from one subject to the next. Say,
one thing that I found useful, and I wanted to just hear your opinion, is a lot of times people zone out through your presentation, especially if you're doing like online, if you have people online. And so sometimes I find that putting information for the person that zoned out for the past 5 minutes, and then they come back in, then being able to just look at the slides and kind of get caught up without you having to backtrack and like explain the last 5 minutes. Because that happens a lot, especially when you present to a whole group. People aren't going to listen all the time. So sometimes when you put just a little bit of information, when people look, they're still confused, and then they have to just kind of, they lose out on everything you just presented. So how would you recommend balancing between being concise but also helping people who you know are going to be distracted throughout the presentation, especially if it's a long presentation?
yeah, I'd say you could use the technique we just talked about. Dave, right? Okay, that Dave and I just talked about. So you have the main bullet points in something like this, but you have more explanation underneath each of them. But you don't have that here to your audience, so you can let them lead you through. But there is that information for them if they just zoned out for the next 5 minutes. Also, you can keep in mind that it's not going to be clear to your audience until you've explained it, until they've read it, until they've heard it several times. There's a lot of things we do in a business setting. There's a lot of things we do all the time where you have to tell someone several times, this is the way we're doing things, and this is the way I recommend this procedure. So even though you just spell it out, contrary to what I might advise you to in this class, your audience is still going to need to hear you say it, and they're still going to need to discuss it, and they're still going to need to come back and reiterate it. So if that's the case, you may have more room to put a few more things on your slide without losing the battle for your audience's attention, if that makes sense. All right. Okay, so transitions. We're moving from point A to point B. I was talking about finance, now I'm talking about marketing. This is very simple. Very important, however, that we bring our audience along with us. I've heard a lot of presentations where a presenter just goes from point 1 to point 2 and you get confused as to what they're talking about. So few choice words can help lead our audience through the important parts of our presentation. I have a strategy I recommend for transitions called the Triple L strategy, which will explain transitions in order of effectiveness. I recommend you lead, link, and label transitions. Let me start at the bottom and explain what I mean by that. At the very least, you want to label your transition. You want to actually say, I was talking about finance, now I'm going to talk about marketing. It's tempting to forget simple stuff like that when we're up here and we're nervous. So label, just say this is a transition. What is slightly better than just labeling is to actually link. Link marketing and link finance. So, I was talking about marketing, and that's going to lead to some questions about how we're going to fund these marketing efforts. And the thing about funding these marketing efforts has to do with finance, which is what we're going to talk about next. So, at the very least, I want to label that I'm moving on to a new subject. It's better if I can link those two and explain how they're related in my presentation. What's even better than that is what I call leading into the transition. Which I mean, if I'm talking about marketing, I'm going to try to get you to think about finance before I even say it. I'm going to talk about all these marketing ideas, the advertising, and I'm going to say, well, gosh, all this advertising, all this stuff, what's the next step? All right, what do we need to think about next when we think about spending $50 million on commercials? Yes, you're right. We need to think about finance. So let's talk now about finance. So I've labeled that I'm transitioning. I've linked the two, and I've even led into it. The more you can do that, the more you're going to take your audience with you. And this may sound, again, like very simple stuff, but it can be very abrupt when you see people forget to do this. It can be very confusing. If you are transitioning speakers, suppose you have 3 people presenting, one from marketing, one from finance, one from operations. Question, how do you transition between speakers? I would use the Triple L strategy. At the very least, label. Say, all right, now I'm going to have Renew talk about finance, and I'm going to pass it along to her. Better yet, link how our jobs are related. Better even than that is lead into it somehow before I pass it off to Renew. Questions about that? Transitions. Very important you label, link, and lead. Next thing I want to talk about, sort of related to transitions, sort of related to PowerPoint design, so I just lump it in here. It is a visual device called a tracker. A tracker is something like this. It is a visual representation of where you are in the presentation. You may have 3 points to your presentation: potential profit, cost, and compliance. The highlighted one is where I am right now. So your audience can very easily follow along. They know what you're talking about, and they can just concentrate on you bringing out the finer points. For example, if I'm going to talk about the 504 loan program in the Small Business Administration, at the top of each slide, I may have something like this. And now I'm talking about potential profit. Now I'm talking about cost. Now I'm talking about compliance. Now, the information below that may get complicated, but my audience has another tool to realize where I am so they don't get lost. They can absorb the important conclusions as I go through them. Trackers, important technique. All right. Visual aids. I'm going to talk about the big visual aids, such as tables, pie charts, bar charts, line graphs. We'll talk about when you might use each of them and how you can do your audience the best service possible by presenting them effectively. First, I want to talk about why we use each of them. As you're constructing your technical presentation stuff for next week, you're going to think about, should I use a pie chart? Should I use a bar, line graph? What's the best system here? And the important thing with that decision is thinking about what your conclusion is, what you're trying to say with the data. Now, a table, it's hard to really say something with the data because it just shows numbers. So we can't do too much there with illustrating our conclusion. But with the other three, we can. For example, pie chart. If I'm going to try to compare one segment to the whole, I might use a pie chart. I might say, look at how big section 1 is. Or look at how small section 3 is. All right, look at how big the whole rest of our sales or our strategy or our opportunities are. A pie chart is effective at showing a comparison between one segment and the rest of the data. How about a bar chart? When might I use a bar chart? What might be an effective use of a bar chart? Yes. Trends? Yeah. I'm going to say trends might be a line graph. If I show an upward trend or a downward trend.
Comparison.
Bar charts are a good visual comparison. So I can visually see the differences on bar charts, and line graphs I can show a comparison or a trend over time. Let's look at a couple of examples. This is a table. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there, but I can't illustrate it with a table. I'm just going to have to talk it to you. There are a couple things you can do with the table to make it a little easier to read. You can make the title row at the top, the subject row along the vertical axis a different color. You can alternate shades to just make it visually easier for your audience to read, but you can't really bring out conclusions with the table. However, with the other types of visual aids, you can. Take a look at this pie chart and tell me what conclusion I'm about to give you. Read it.
First quarter, you make the most sales.
First quarter, I make the most sales. All right, that's why I'm using this graph. I want to tell you about all the sales we made in the first quarter. Now, there are a couple other stories, if you will, in this data. If you look carefully, you can see there's more going on than just first quarter sales are huge. Does anyone see it? Anyone want to tell me what they see? Yes.
They go down with each quarter.
Yes, trending down with each quarter. Anything else? All right, the other thing I like to point out is that second quarter sales are very significant. They are bigger than third and fourth quarter sales combined. So that may be an opportunity for our company. That may be something important that I want to share with you. But it's not very obvious if I choose a pie graph. If I want to tell you if I want you to get a visual look at second quarter sales, I may use the bar graph. I'll still see the dominance of first quarter sales, but it gives me a better, second quarter sales, they're like 3 times as big as third quarter sales. Wow, I didn't think about that. Maybe we've got to think about keeping our seasonal staff through the second quarter. If I want to show you the comparison over time, the trending down, the line graph is going to be the best way to illustrate that. Any questions about that? Okay. I want to show you a technique for presenting graphs. I call the take technique. It involves presenting in a certain order, starting by presenting the title, then presenting the axes, then explaining the key takeaway, and then elaborating on the key takeaway. Now, as I present a graph, you're naturally going to want to look at different parts of it. But you need certain information before you really absorb the key takeaway to a graph. You need to know what the title is and what it means. You need to know what's on the vertical and horizontal axes. And then you're going to look to me to give you the key point and then elaborate on it. Now, as the presenter, if it's your graph. If you've worked for months on it, if you're so familiar with it, it is so tempting to just dive into little nuances. To just say, look, here's the graph. Look at the funny thing with the XY coordinates and the regression and this and that. It's overwhelmingly tempting so often to dive into those nuances, to show what's exciting about it, or if you're nervous, to show you're valuable. I want to show you that I found some valuable, insightful thing with this graph. And I'm almost afraid to give you the basic information like the axes and the title. And I developed this when I was working with some energy analysts in DC who had all sorts of regression analysis, all sorts of complicated stuff. I never understood half of what they said, but I was able to say, look, I'm going to be able to absorb at least half of what you said, probably not more, if you can put this in a context for me. So for example, if I'm going to use the take technique on this next graph, you say, this graph is going to illustrate sales for our company. Around the axes, we have first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. The key takeaway for this graph is that sales were dominant in the first quarter. I'm going to pause and let that sink in, and then I might tell you some more nuances. Let's look at the downward trend. Let's look at second quarter being big, being significant. So your audience is going to need that information. What's the title? What do the axes mean? And they need you to say what the key takeaway is. And you need to let them absorb that for a minute, no matter how tempting it is to just move on. How do you like the take technique? You think it would be helpful for some presentations that you've seen where you maybe didn't understand the graph that was being presented? All right, and also can help keep you on track if you're tempted to rush ahead. All right, jargon. I'm going to finish up with a little jargon exercise. We'll see how far we get through it. How am I doing on my 25 minutes? Am I at promise? Am I past promise? I'm just, oh, okay, all right. So all right. So I lied. We're gonna go a few minutes plus another 6 minutes with this jargon exercise, maybe 7. Okay, so jargon. What is jargon? You'll like this exercise. It'll liven us up right now.
Really fancy words that you would use like in your field of work.
Yeah, fancy words that apply to you in your field of work. Now, is everyone going to understand the jargon? No, just people who are as familiar with that industry as you are. So, as a presenter, you want to avoid things that your audience is not going to understand. So they're not going to if they don't understand it, they're not going to value it the same way you value it. When you hear something you don't understand, rarely will an audience say, gosh, I don't understand that. You must be really smart. Here, let me sign up with your company. Let me give you a job. Let me instill confidence in you somehow. That just doesn't happen. I did sales for several years, and when you confuse a potential client, they don't buy from you, ever. You need to have your audience understand what you're saying in order for them to value your presentation. So we want to avoid that type of job. Serious meeting, distracts your audience, it's going to waste time. They have to stop and say, what does this mean? Maybe you haven't prepared what it means in a concise fashion, and you get sidetracked when you just have a few minutes with top management to explain something. Lack of strength, unknown equals unimportant. So, I have a jargon elimination strategy called the Triple E jargon elimination strategy. Expose jargon and eliminate that jargon or explain that jargon. So, expose. Look through your presentation. Realize where you may have included jargon unintentionally. Ask your friend, hey, do you know what this word means or this concept means? Where you find it, eliminate it if you can. Take that jargon out of the presentation. Or you may find that that's something that is essential to my conclusion, so I have to explain that piece of jargon, and I'm going to think of a way to explain it effectively before I get in the tense pressure situation of actually doing that presentation. So, expose and eliminate or explain. Let's go through an example. I've got a sports example for you of some information describing a basketball game that has a lot of jargon in it. And I'm going to ask you to think about where the jargon is and how we could expose it, and, well, we're going to expose it, how we could eliminate or explain it if necessary. All right, and what I like about this example is it's basketball. All right, at the end of the day, it's not rocket science. Everyone can understand it, but it's certainly possible for me to explain this to you in a way that you completely won't understand. So let's think about how we can not do that. I'm going to read through this event that happened a couple years ago, this basketball game. And then I'm going to go through it again and ask each of you to tell me where the jargon is and how we can eliminate or explain it. So, what I'm going to describe to you again right now is a basketball game, Miami Heat versus the Brooklyn Nets. On April 8th, 2014, Miami hosted Brooklyn in one of the last games of the regular season. So this is 2 seasons ago. Miami hosted Brooklyn in one of the last games of the regular season. Brooklyn had won all 3 previous regular season games. Miami initially used size advantage to attack the paint. Miami's LeBron James and Chris Bosh both got into foul trouble early in the third quarter and relied more on perimeter shooting. Miami's James and Bosh combined 0 of 7 in three-point attempts. With the inside threat removed, Brooklyn's Mason Plumlee guarded Miami's LeBron James aggressively and blocked LeBron's would have been game-winning shot with 2.1 seconds remaining in the game. Brooklyn won 88-87. Okay, so we're going to present that. We're going to start by trying to eliminate the jargon. So let's go through each line, think about where the jargon is, how we can get it out of our presentation and be more effective presenting this information. So, who wants to take the top line for us? On April 8th, Miami hosted Brooklyn in one of the last games of the regular season. Any jargon there we need to explain? Yeah.
So, when you actually went over this line, you actually had to break down what regular season meant, assuming that is jargon itself. So I'd probably say one of the ways you can rewrite this is instead of using regular season, you could say Miami versus Brooklyn in the last game of the season.
Okay, last game of the season?
Or last game for, I don't know.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you brought this up. You are the perfect audience member who kind of understands this, but there's an additional piece. What happens after the regular season? Playoffs, all right? And the playoffs are arguably more important than the regular season. So these teams are getting ready for the playoffs. There may be some momentum as they go into the playoffs. We're getting to an exciting part of the season, right? Miami hosted right before the playoffs, all right? What's LeBron James going to do in the playoffs? Everybody's waiting to see. Brooklyn had won all 3 previous regular season games. And now there may not be jargon per se in this, but what I might call expert understanding. Like you understand it in a certain way because you're familiar with basketball that someone else needs to know to appreciate it. Is there anything going on with that, Dave?
Yeah, are there only 4 games in a basketball season or 4 games between the teams? Right?
They won, so all 3 Brooklyn had won.
Right, but it just says previous regular season games. We don't know if those are the games against Miami, if they won the last.
Okay. All right. I didn't think about that, but it is against Miami. It won previous regular season game with Miami. So, good point. Any expert understanding there we need to realize? Probably not too much, maybe a little bit momentum. What do you got?
I'm just going to say Miami has a chip on their shoulder.
Miami has a chip on their shoulder. Miami is also hoping to do very well in the playoffs, but they've lost all 3 times to Brooklyn. Now, this is the 4th time. They lose 4 times in a row to Brooklyn. How are they going to win the playoffs? That's a concern. All right, so maybe some momentum effects going into the playoffs and the fact that we are very near the playoffs, which is the important part of the season so far. Okay. Miami initially used size advantage to attack the paint. Yes?
No idea what the size advantage is.
All right, so 2 pieces of jargon, size advantage and paint. All right, can someone break that down for us and say how we would explain it without that jargon? Okay. What is it? So can someone? What's your name, by the way? Mindy, can someone explain this to Mindy? What does size advantage and attack the paint mean?
I think they try to use LeBron James. Basically, for the players, they matched him up with the bigger players in terms of defense.
Okay, Evan?
So as bigger players, they were able to force their way inside toward the rim instead of shooting from the corner.
Yeah, so they have bigger players. That's size advantage. What does attack the paint mean?
Talking about the painted area inside the free throw line.
Okay, so the painted area is the painted area inside the free throw line. But what's another way of saying that, which helps Mindy understand what attack the paint means?
Fouls?
Play within 8 feet of the rim. Shoot close range shots. Okay, so they had tall players and they were shooting close range shots. That's much clearer than size advantage to attack the paint. But it's very tempting for basketball aficionados to talk this way. Very tempting. So they you have bigger players and they shot close range shots. Miami's LeBron James and Chris Bosh both got into foul trouble early in the third quarter and relied more on perimeter shooting. What's the jargon? How do we straighten it out, Ricky?
No clue what is perimeter shooting. 3 pointers.
Okay.
They got into a lot of trouble inside, so they didn't work 3 pointers.
Okay. Foul. Does anybody know foul trouble?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. So you know foul trouble. Okay. So we need to explain what that means. But there's another component of foul trouble. Does anyone know what it is? What's that?
No one knows what the consequence. Why does it even matter? So saying that if they have too many fouls, they could be out of the game.
Okay, so they need to understand if you have too many fouls, you're out of the game. They just need to technically understand. But there's a way foul trouble affects play.
They can no longer use their larger people to push in and shoot closer to the rim.
They can no longer use their size advantage to attack the paint. They can no longer use larger people to shoot close range shots because they're in foul trouble and getting at risk of being thrown out of the game. So they have to change their strategy. They were able to shoot close range shots. Now they have to use long range shots. And perimeter shooting, that's what long range shots, that means long range shots. And how did they do on long range shots? Not very good. Miami's James and Bosh combined were 0 of 7 in 3-point attempts. So they did not hit many of those long range shots. They had to change from short range to long range, and they didn't do so well with that. With the inside threat removed, Brooklyn's Mason Plumlee guarded LeBron James aggressively and blocked his would have been game-winning shot with 2.1 seconds remaining. This is a nuanced one. I don't think anyone's going to be able to do it justice besides me. Anyone? So the inside threat means they couldn't fake like they were going to shoot the close range shots. Everybody knew they had to shoot the long range shots. And I guess the jargon or expert understanding here is Mason Plumlee, a rookie from Duke, versus LeBron James, the best basketball player in the world. He blocks LeBron James' shot. All right, what would you all say if you blocked LeBron James' shot? You'd be like, oh my God, I blocked LeBron James' shot. So every once in a while I get someone who knows basketball so well that says, yeah, that was just quite a statement, as Miami and LeBron James lost for the 4th time in a row to Brooklyn, and LeBron, the best player in the world, gets his shot blocked by some snot-nosed kid from Duke.
This is all true.
Yeah? Yeah, this is all true. Yes, but good. I'm glad you're interested in it, and this is the point. All right, you understand these nuances. It's an interesting game, and when I confuse you with technical terms and jargon, it doesn't make as much sense. All right, so let's do it in a more clear fashion, in a way that's going to make it more interesting to our audience who doesn't understand jargon. All right, I'm going to start with the conclusion because you are focused on the conclusion at the beginning, and I'm going to tell you Brooklyn won by limiting and then overcoming Miami's offense, and thus increased momentum. That's the conclusion. Let's break down how we got there. First, Miami's star players successfully used size advantage to score close range shots. Then I have to explain foul trouble. I think foul trouble is something I need to explain. You need to know what it means and how it affects the style of the game. I can't play those close range shots anymore. I have to change strategy to long range shots. How did it work out for us? Miami changed strategy to long range shots, and they were unsuccessful. You need one more piece before I'm ready to give you the conclusion. I want to tell you that Brooklyn held the series momentum. They were ahead 3 games to nothing. As the playoffs, the key part of the season, drew near, well, Got it all. Brooklyn won by limiting and then overcoming Miami's offense and thus increased momentum. Jargon-free, more interesting. Clear. Any questions? All right, great. So let me, our content enhancements, I'm going to talk about content enhancements, the beginning, middle, and end. How am I doing on time? I lied to you again, I'm sure I did. Okay, yeah, we got to go. I just got to push through. Get you out here by 9:30 for sure. Okay, so the beginning of your presentation, your audience is focused, their attention is on you, so it's an opportunity for you to do some important things, like portray your conclusion in an effective way. Ways you could do that. You could make a startling statement. Did you know that 95% of people run out of retirement funds? Startling, isn't it? All right, let me tell you how to avoid that. I might give you an anecdote, a little narration. I might give you a quotation, something Teddy Roosevelt said about running out of money for your retirement. I might start with a question. I might say, do you know how much money you're going to need in 50 years? Get you thinking like that. All right, beginning. These are some techniques you can use next week to liven it up. As you get towards the middle of your presentation and explore or support your conclusion, hopefully you're going to have some facts. We're going to want to hear your opinion because you're the person who is giving us this important conclusion based on you being the smart MBA student. We want to hear your opinion. Use some humor. Tell a joke, a funny story that relates to your content. Give us some examples. As we get to the end of your presentation, another memorable moment where the audience attention is very high. And we don't want to waste that opportunity. We want to signal the ending. We want to tell people that we're coming to the end so they will zone in. We want to restate our main point. Think about it, refer back to the opening question. I asked you, did you know how much money you're going to have and need in 50 years? I hope I've answered that. Give you a vivid, positive picture. I might explain next steps. I've just spent 10, 15 minutes giving you a presentation. I've got your attention. What do I want you to do with it? So don't waste an opportunity to reiterate your conclusion or possibly create a call to action. Okay, let me do this. Let me quickly go over your presentation expectations for next week. So I'm going to grab the syllabus. I would like to ask you to, between now and next week, think about a technical presentation. You're going to throw together some PowerPoint slides on a topic of your choosing. You're going to give us about a 5-minute presentation with those slides using these techniques. Your presentation may be informational or persuasive. Either is fine. Use the conclusion framework we discussed. And there are various expectations in this presentation. One is use at least one graph that you can construct yourself. Think about gathering some data and putting it in either a pie chart, line graph, bar chart, something that enforces your conclusion the way you want to. And there's some other expectations. The key one is the graph. Make sure you actually create a graph from scratch and use it in your presentation. And when I look at your PowerPoint, I'll actually look over it and say, was this actually a graph created from scratch? If it's just a picture pasted in, then that's not good enough. So please don't do that. I've asked you to do some other things. Consider the template design, do the customization, an appropriate header or footer, like we talked about. Concise, uncluttered subheadings. Picture. Just grab a picture of something, get some practice pasting it into PowerPoint. Customized graph, as I mentioned. Entrance effects. If you use those builds, those animation effects, use that 5 or so times. Yeah, 5 or more times just to practice that if you haven't practiced it before. Or think about how you would use this. Transitions, try to use the transition techniques we talked about. Think about a powerful way to grab our attention at the beginning, powerful way to conclude, and think about some good content. Any questions?
So technicals, respectfully, it's kind of vague, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things can be technical.
Yeah.
What did you have in mind for this sort of thing?
Yeah. Usually I play this game where I say, does anyone have any ideas? and people give me ideas, and I just say yes to everything that they say. I say, yes, that's a fantastic idea, fantastic idea, fantastic idea. I do that 5 or 6 times, and people say, oh yeah, I can do that. So let's do that real quick. Last good presentation. Sometimes students will do a resume PowerPoint presentation. I used to make that the actual assignment. I don't do that anymore, but you can still do a resume PowerPoint presentation. So this is me as a job candidate. Here, here's the amount of funds I was managing 4 years ago and 2 years ago, and see how there's an upward trend. You could create some sort of graph about your qualitative skills. You could say, here's my customer service ability versus my sales ability. You could just kind of make it up from that standpoint if you're talking about yourself. But let's do that. Give me some ideas of things you might do your technical presentation on. Jim.
No, that was me going.
Okay. Go ahead. Yes. Okay. Well, okay, you want to have a conclusion for sure. And the conclusion might be, look at my resume and look how awesome I am at being an accountant. You should hire me. That's a perfectly valuable conclusion, perfectly valid conclusion. You may want to explain something to us about your job. You may want to explain something to us about one of your hobbies. That's perfectly valid as well. But give me some ideas, like what's the topic of your presentation? Yes?
So I have science background, so I was thinking something like, not that I'm going to do this, but something like seatbelt safety.
Okay.
And how many motor vehicle accidents that happen
Yes.
in a year.
All right, seatbelt safety, why seatbelts are important. Here's some data to support my conclusion that seatbelts are important. That's fantastic. I remember I had a dual business student, med student, who did a presentation on childhood vaccinations. That stands out as a really good presentation. And she explained why vaccinations are a very good thing, and people who don't vaccinate are causing a health risk, and here's some data to support that. Yes, Minnie. It could be either something you're trying to persuade us, or it could just be informational. I want you to understand this is how active management works, and this is how passive management works. We're going to look for a conclusion, and you're going to have one. So it's not just going to be listing data, but if it could just be informational, being say, here's the takeaway on active management, here's the conclusion on passive management. That could be a little vague. Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, other ideas for technical presentation? Give me some ideas. Come on. We're running out of time. iPhone versus Android. Why not? All right. You could talk about Rutgers Business School. Here's why you should be a part-time student at Rutgers Business School. Here are the great things about it. All right, here's someone did a presentation about the CFA. She was getting ready to take the CFA, and she talked about how that can help your career. Here's some technical data to support it. Any questions on this? All right, so we will do those next time. You will submit your PowerPoint presentation. I think I asked 30 minutes prior to class via Blackboard, and then I will get those ready, and we will just run through those, and I will give you feedback. We will talk about how well you're using the techniques that we went over tonight. And that will be the class tomorrow, or excuse me, next week. Any other questions on it? All right. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
once we submit it through Blackboard, you're going to have all of our presentations, so you're going to be
Yeah. And I'll have everything up. I'll have everything, so you can just stand up and click on your presentation, open it up. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now is a team graph presentation. I think we have the perfect amount of time to do this. And like I said, you may not realize it, but you're lucky that we're doing this in class versus trying to coordinate with your teammates out of class and spending way more time on it than I think you need to. I would like you to look at a fairly simple piece of data. Yes. Okay. All right. Your objective over the next hour is to analyze the given data and present a valuable, insightful conclusion to your fellow MBA candidates using Excel graphs as necessary. You are going to look at the 1-month advertisement spending on social media sites by industry. It's a comparison of August 2008 versus August 2009, broken down by 12, 15 industries, how much they spent in the month of August 2008 versus how much they spent in the month of August 2009. You're going to put this data into an Excel sheet. You can access this via Blackboard under the course documents folder. I have the Excel sheet right there, so you don't have to copy it down. You can just put it right into Excel. And I will tell you right now that the trap of this exercise, if there are so many different conclusions you could draw, it's tempting for your team to try to list all of them and say, oh, this is what's interesting about it. This is the trend that we see. This is what it meant in 2008 when we saw this industry spending more. But this industry spent more raw numbers-wise. This industry spent more percentage-wise. And by the time you get done explaining all those interesting things that happen, you will have lost your audience. And the objective here is for you to condense it down and say, what is the important conclusion that you want to share with your MBA students, fellow MBA students, and illustrate that with 1, maybe 2 graphs. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go. How many people do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so let's go 4 teams. We'll go 4 teams. So let's get in groups of 4 or 5. And at least one person needs to have a laptop. And you can get right on Blackboard and under course materials, under resources, I think, one of those folders. You can pull up the Excel data. You can put it in an Excel sheet. Think about how you want to present it, what the important conclusion is. We're going to spend about 8:30 now. Let's spend 30 minutes doing that. All right, so this is just a quick look. Get some ideas, think about going with it, and then I will come around with a little thumb drive, and I will get everyone's graph, and we'll have 4 quick presentations. All right, so I'll be around if you have questions, and if you need to take a break, step outside, do what you need to do. We'll come back together at 9 o'clock. Oh, let me make sure the groups go. Actually, go to your, formulate your groups and stand with your groups. See if we have any stragglers.
Sure.
All right, so 4 in there. So say, let's see, you want to work with this guy, with this group? Say, all right, fantastic. Fantastic, perfect.
Can you take a break? So if you take 5 minutes and come back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Instructional.
4 straight hours.
Yeah?
I think it's through your net.
Yeah.
I have an engineering degree.
You want me? What, you need what?
No, I'm good.
Oh.
I'm just gonna.
That's good.
Should we use your laptop?
Go down there.
And it's all
Total of all this year.
I get
And then the percentage.
Yeah, it looks like everything increased.
Other than interviews.
I can't remember the good one.
No.
Oh wait,
yeah,
it
tennis,
goes.
you're right.
Yeah.
That's one of the So one of the
Did
things
it go up or did it read the other way?
Sorry, Tom.
Oh, it did go up. That was the one.
You're not planning going to because I spend a lot of time on something.
what exceeded the industry average, like if total 5%.
We have like a grace period. Right? I think this week we can come Australian warning. So that's why I came with my car. And you know what happened to me? I came Tuesday, like thinking
So like the
that
first chart,
marketing
like double bar.
was pushing to the
Right, that's what I'm saying.
You do stack bar with the colors, you kind of
Right.
stick everything together.
And I pay my permit for
But
that day.
I'm definitely
$5.
interested in like comparing like what's
Yeah, that's what I did. Tuesday, I looked for the room. So I like today, I didn't waste time. I knew where is the room, and I know where is marketing next week.
Get the
So the fifth floor.
percentage increase. At a plus
That's
percentage.
next week. Next week.
No, I had an idea, but I was getting it.
Go ahead.
So you were saying something about the percentage you spend, right? Calculate that and then put that in the so for which what was
That would show you which ones have
the largest
percentage.
impact,
It's like a shift.
right?
It's like so entertainment for
Right.
What if we just got the data just for our own, like if we bucketed some, like basically some each of the columns, so we could just see overall spend. Because we know it definitely increased, right? Just looking at it, like we have 10x in entertainment.
So overall, was 49 for 2008.
What would happen? Can you see like the percentage across
The other thing I think we should also do is percentage of spend. Because maybe the number of the percentage is different.
that minus policy divided by policy. You can do it overall for the total or
Overall, is 119%.
so for example automotive 78% increase.
From 2%. Yeah, I think it might be better if it's behind.
Oh,
So overall is 119%. Big corporates looks like travel.
But we should also do the personal because maybe the numbers went up, but the person is a proportion of the total spending.
The overall you're saying, Chris?
Well, it's like
49 overall, so you're saying overall.
I think there's two important trends. Number one is I think how the industry is changing, right? Because I think the two different things that I think are very important. Number one, you notice there's an industry growth overall, more than double every year. But what's interesting is the cases where things greatly exceeded the overall industry, right? So that would tell you like there's a lot of growth, there's like a hot growth rate. People like, for example, retail goods and services, like year over year, you're like, wow, 55% growth, that's incredible. But I think if you focus on the market as a whole, after the industry average of 119%, so it's actually pretty terrible growth. So I think us identifying
That's a good conclusion for us.
industries in particular as well, predicting the Fed.
Should all work.
Overall, look at it.
Good job in the social media industry. That's all the money's done. That's the conclusion. I would come up.
Do they have anything left to pay you, or have they spent it all on media?
You work for the company. That's where all the money's done. Everyone is giving money to them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So the conclusion is all of us should be working for social media companies because all the money is going to them. Everyone, every industry is increasing by double, triple, or more. And that's a great
So it
industry
also
to be in.
means the audience too, right? Like that many more people are actively using social media to learn more about entertainment, financial services, health, service, public. Like everyone's using social media not just to stay in touch with their friends, but they're selling and they're able to grow their business.
It's advertising, right? Are these advertising expenditures?
It's like they'll do, like if you do a Google search on like straighteners or something, hair straighteners, next time you go on Facebook, it'll come up with like an advertisement
Yeah.
Really, there definitely is a really, so 2008 to 2009, 2008 was a recession, and then I guess coming out of it, is that when it started booming?
We're still kind of in a recession. Right?
I think we can just pick a premise and then make a couple of graphs that fit to the premise, right? It's just data. You can say anything you want about it. So we could, if we want to take the aspect that we work at the social media company, we can point out total spending, the growth across some industries, and then make another slide that shows the industries that haven't grown 10, 12x in their spending, and say that's where our market is, right? That's where we should concentrate. So we just have to think of why we're using the information and then what context we present.
We'll start with the goal and then we can back it up with stuff.
The goal is to increase total sales in the smaller growing market segments.
You mean as a social media company?
Yes. If these are our sales, we put up one graph that shows the total growth trend. We put up a graph that shows the high potential, right? The real high users, and say clearly 10 times, 20 times growth on some of these is possible in revenue. This set of companies only grew 4 by over 2009. They're our growth segment. They're the ones we should be focusing on.
Well, I can this is really just one I think is the basis. I'm almost thinking like
But the most.
So what falls under that?
there's many basis points below.
So the jump is more than double.
I'm not sure what media is. Why is it like?
Okay, ready when you are.
Sure. And today we're going to be giving a quick presentation very high level on the social media advertising gamble and why you should look at potentially increasing your investment into the social media platforms. So to start off, first we're going to throw some data at you. Slide can be a bit overwhelming, but what we're trying to really derive here, if you take a quick look, is that these are all the industries, kind of all the vertical markets across the board. And if you notice, this is kind of a year-over-year comparison from 2008 to 2009 August. And what this slide is really trying to show you is that overall, almost every vertical across the board in the past year has almost doubled, and in some cases tenfold increased their investment in social media and social media platforms. So you may be asking, what's the reason for this trend? Why is this kind of the trend across the board here? So if we go to the next slide, again, this is kind of going year over year. We can go to the next one. And kind of by percentage here. Go to the next. So lots of breakdowns, lots of kind of ambiguous data here, but overall, there's a few select reasons of why vertical markets would increase investment in social platforms. So one, let's go to this slide. No, keep going. Okay, so what changed? What happened in 2008 to 2009 that would lead all these markets to increase investment? Well, for starters, internet access year over year continues to grow, not just in the U.S. but globally. As more people adopt internet into their homes, into their businesses, access to the web becomes more readily available. You have more users, more of your target audience is going to be online and connected. We also have better services being offered from the service providers. So you have 4G networks, you have LTE speeds. People are able to connect faster and and their access points are more available. You can go to a McDonald's or a Starbucks now, anywhere you are, and connect to online. Now, in order to connect online in general, you're going to need devices, right? So you have companies like Apple, like Samsung, where you have all these emerging markets of increased smartphone access. People are now having more connected devices in their hand. There's new form factors such as tablets, ultrabooks, laptops, all different devices that are always connected, being sold into the consumer market. So you, again, just kind of increasing your overall target audience. Not only that, social media is becoming more prevalent. Where at first, a few years ago, we maybe only had 1 or 2 platforms. Now we have maybe 5 or 6 platforms. And those 5 or 6 platforms have over 30, 40 million users. So you're having more increased presence not only in the platforms, but the people using these applications and these services. And social media, again, almost instantly, thanks to the phenomenon that is the internet and the web, you have access to a majority of your target audience versus before where maybe you were only limited to how many mailers you can mail out, right, for an advertisement. Now you can reach anyone, anywhere, globally, instantaneous, for a much lower cost than you could before. Next slide. So what does it all mean? So all of these markets, all of these competitors, automobiles, entertainment, etc., all these markets are already know that this is the trend. We see this happening. Rather than be a reactive organization, we want to definitely be a proactive organization and ride this industry trend and this wave. So it's not a matter of ROI, how much am I going to get on my investment for web, right? Because advertising expenses in general are, how many customers you're going to engage. But to be competitive in this landscape, you're going to have a lot of your businesses now, whether they're small or large, everyone's going to be competing on this platform, on this landscape here. And just to be competitive from an organizational standpoint, you're going to have to increase your web presence, you're going to have to get online, and you're going to have to be able to reach these customers, because if you're not doing it, your competitor definitely is. So with that, I'm going to open it up to some questions. Or you can clap.
Excellent. Comments for this team? All right, what was their conclusion? What was the main point of their presentation? Yeah. I think there was internet spending is increasing across the board, and you should invest. I think that was pretty clear and well presented. can you go back to that first slide with text that you had on it? So at the top of the, sorry, forward. Yes. So what changed at the top? We knew how that was all categorized. And then go to the next slide, please. What does it all mean? I think those are good posts that kept us focused on their conclusion. What did we think of the visual aids they chose to support their conclusion?
I think that part wasn't presented well. That's why they skipped over it. It wasn't useful.
Yeah, it wasn't useful. So why might it not have been useful?
We spent too much on the big chart and didn't use the graphs to illustrate our point as effectively.
Yeah, so their point was everything increased across the board, but their visual aids were, let's look at these 13 different industries, which is not really what you spoke to. So it just didn't supplement it as well. That's the only thing I'm going to pick on. Otherwise, great job. Team Renew.
You want support? I will open support you.
Can you work the computer since we don't have a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Start with the first slide. Start from sheet 1, and then I'll ask you. Okay.
Yeah, we did. No, you can just present the graphs. Yeah, fantastic. And this one's
All right. So you're all in the marketing. You're all in marketing. You are paired up, and you each represent different segments of the marketing team for us. These are our sales, 2008 versus 2009. Okay. All right. Team, we're gonna keep this short and get right to the point. 2008 recession started. It was a bad year, and 2009 hasn't been any better. So does anybody believe they're going to be able to walk into their clients this year and tell them they should spend more money on marketing while everything is going poorly? It's just probably not going to happen, right? So the way we're going to make our sales numbers this year is we're going to find the folks who are spending least on social media, and we're going to get those folks to go to our cost-effective solution so they can hit more people for the same dollars. Real quick, there's no point in going through by industry and growth percentage year over year. There's no point for us to go and hit entertainment, travel, and the business-to-business community. They've already had a significant shift in their budget from 2008 to 2009. They don't have a lot of dollars for us. We want to be concentrating on this long tail at the end. Last year, the average, by industry, the average was 119% increase. Anybody below the bottom line is increasing their social media spend by less than the average. Those are our targets. We want to go out and figure out how to get them to convert their TV dollars to media dollars. And we are going to use our proven sales strategy of convincing them that a dollar of social media spend is worth $3, where their TV dollar only buys them $1.25. So we are going to go out there and we are going to hit retail, hardware, equipment, financial services, and consumer goods. Those are our targets in 2010. That's who we want to get. And we will win. We will make our revenue numbers this year by getting them to convert more of their sales dollars over to our media. Thank you.
Excellent. Great job. Comments for this team? So what was the conclusion? Yeah, these are the specific teams we should target, and why should we, or specific industries we should target, and why should we target these industries? They're not spending enough. That was clear from the beginning. Well maintained. Yeah. Any thoughts? I mean, the graph seemed to work. Anything else they could have done with the graph or visual aid to support that conclusion? Yeah.
I was trying to do it with the mouse.
I think this was, in terms of the exercise, the goal I asked you to do, it was right on. You did exactly what I wanted you to do. The only thought I had while I was listening to it is you mentioned that you want to target those industries. Or wait, no, you said the ones that have already increased by a significant percentage, they don't have a lot of dollars for us. And I'm thinking like, well, but they spent so much money on it, maybe they do have a lot of dollars for you. So that was distracting me a little bit. And these, I was thinking as I heard that maybe a better way to frame, or a different way to frame the conclusion, not necessarily better, would be the industries on the left-hand side have already seen the light. The industries on the right-hand side have not quite seen the light. But that's just nitpicking on the details. All right. Any other thoughts? All right, let's move on to the next team. Do you see last one? Yes, that's great. I love it. We've got, I'm using the infrared pointer as necessary.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex Torresano. My team and I will be presenting on the increase in spend in social media advertisement across industries when comparing 2009 data versus August 2008 data. So from this chart here, we have listed the industries on the bottom axis and their relative percentage increase on the vertical axis. And from what we see here, we can see that entertainment and travel increased by far the most in relative terms. Entertainment increased 800%. Travel increased more than 300%. And then we also see the automotive industry followed right after that. So the key takeaways from this slide is that we see that the industries that were impacted the most by the recession, they ramped up their spending the most in 2009. This would tell us that they're expecting their revenue to increase as well, being as though they were affected the most. They're now trying to capture more of the revenue that they lost through increasing spending in social media. Another key takeaway that we see here is that advertisement itself is very much related to the changes in the economy. So as the economy goes in an upward trend, we'll see that across all industries, more spending will occur for advertisement, and the advertisement industry should be positively affected by that change. Another key takeaway here is that in terms of investment, if anyone is trying to invest, we see which industries feel the most confident as far as spending and as far as getting revenue sales. So another key takeaway would be that the entertainment, travel, automotive, and even advertising business would be good places to look for in terms of investment in 2009. That's all we have. Does anyone have any questions?
All right, good. Comments for this team? Nick?
Kind of talked a little too much towards the presentation.
Oh yeah. So just in terms of the physicality, Alex was talking to his slides. And another thing I'll mention while we're on. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I noticed that after a while.
Yeah. And another couple interesting things. He's positioned to the left of the slides, which is something we went over. But in this case, see how much of a difference does that make? Just turning his body language to us. All right, that is a little bit more powerful. But even with that, with standing in this corner with this big of a visual aid, it just looked like he was lost in the corner there. Looked like he was just an insignificant part of this presentation. Combined with the fact that he had his back to us, He just wasn't able to engage us with that physicality, which was too bad because there were some interesting concepts. And this is just why we're taking this course. It's how do we impress our audience with what is important by not letting some of these physicality issues get in our way. So that was a couple notes on presentation physicality. How about the content of what he was saying? What was the site?
There was some interesting stuff. Like I liked some of the points he made, like talking about the fact that, like, entertainment and travel were the most affected by the recession, but they're the most investing now. The only problem that I had though with the content, there was a lot of interesting nuggets in there, but there wasn't a solid like, here's what you should do now. It was like, here's a bunch of recommendations for you guys. You kind of choose whichever one makes sense for you. So at the end, I kind of left with nothing, except for a bunch of cool information.
Sure. Nick? Okay. Lack of clarity. Nick?
One thing was, I think the data is for social media spending, but from the slide I wouldn't know it had anything to do with social media because it just looks like this.
Okay. Yeah, so let me talk about the slide in a minute because there was some really good stuff about the way Alex presented that slide and he effectively used the take method. But in terms of the conclusion, I mentioned at the beginning, this is the trap. The trap is there's so much interesting stuff that if you try to list it all, you just sound like someone who's standing up here listing data. And so thank you for being the guinea pigs here who fell into the trap for us to give us an opportunity to think about that. I think there were 3 different key takeaways you had, and I think, to be honest, I didn't really clearly understand any of the 3. I think the first one was something about revenue increasing as a result, or they were expecting revenue to increase as a result, which I was a little unclear about. And then the other 2, I just wasn't clear about. So I think if you had focused on just one and said, let me explain that clearly, then it would have helped your presentation significantly. But what I want to say, in terms of how you presented that, I was able to follow the graph. He set it up very well. This is the first time we saw this percentage increase. I think maybe the first presentation we had a brief look at percentage. But the way he set it up just prepared me for it. And he explained the axes, and he explained what the data in the middle meant. So we could clearly see entertainment and travel were the biggest ones. So we're waiting for some clear takeaway that's going to show us how those 2 tall bars are important. So great job setting it up, but again, you fell into the understandable trap of, I think, trying to present too much. And this is just a great example for us to learn from. So thank you. Good work. All right, let's do a quick presentation here. This team. Fantastic. All right, and we've got a infrared thing. Wonder if you need.
Alright, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. We work for a social media company and we want to see where we want to target our business development efforts for the next year. So our team has put together a chart, and this chart shows the spending that happened and the difference in spending between August 2008 and August 2009. So this is a laser. So the y-axis shows the percentage growth. So it's the difference between the numbers. And you all have the handout that you got with the table. So this describes the numbers are converted into chart here. And then the x-axis has all the different industries. And when we look at these numbers, we see that, from the business development side, the top 2 industries that have really increased their spending over the last year is the entertainment industries and the travel. So I think for our company, from the business development side, we should target those 2 because it's a much bigger pie and the funds are moving in that direction. In addition, as a 2-pronged approach, what we should also do is these other industries who have not, this is the line here, the red line, 119 is the average growth when we look at the growth from 2008 to 2009. These industries here have not, spent in compared to the average. So we should also target, if we look at they have, they will have more room to grow and put money in social media.
Awesome. Great work. Really pretty slide, right? Captures our attention, and it's clear. Just like we talked about from the last presentation, we've got two visually huge bars. That's going to draw our attention, so tell us what that means. Only problem I had with your conclusion was we should target these two industries because there's a bigger pie. Is that true? This is just percent differences. If you want the bigger pie, you're going to have somebody in the back room saying, wait a minute, that's just a very small pie. If we want the bigger pie, we want to look at the raw numbers. So I think if you wanted to say, let's go for the bigger pie, then you should have used the graph that shows the raw number increase. The only thing, because you don't want that analyst in the back of the room saying, wait a minute, that's not logical. So you just want to avoid that. But that's the only comment I would make. Great meeting you all. Look forward to seeing your technical presentations next week. Email me if you have any questions. Hope you don't mind I kept you right till 9:30. We'll do the same thing next week, and then after that we'll have a little bit more time to breathe. But look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. Thanks.
Only one. I did great.